refresh and review the constitutional amendments that we talked about when we were with you last fall. Those were held over to the coming year. We have some conference realignment task force updates, a little bit of reminder and update on the new Title IX directive regarding sexual assault and harassment, the maximum number of games and meets, and a process that we ought to begin talking about and working on as a membership to address some of the concerns for adding contests and those sorts of things, which cause some consternation on occasion when they have popped up. We have a recommendation from the Sportsmanship Committee regarding the ejection of a fan. And we think it would be worthwhile to review all of the special accommodations that staff have put in front of the board and the Board of Control has approved for helping us to move forward through this year, cutting through some of the bureaucracy and red tape under the special circumstances and conditions that have been thrust upon us with this pandemic. And also, we have as a breakout topic some of the responses to a member request. Actually, the request originated primarily from our advisory council and members of the advisory council requesting another study group being formed to look at competition. Before we get to those topics and the other items on our agenda, I've asked Todd Clark to summarize, for efficiency's sake, those items that came to us yesterday for airing in open forum. And so we are grateful for your willingness to submit your questions, remarks, commentary in advance, knowing that it would be a little bit more efficient to try to handle the member feedback, member input in this manner, as opposed to just leaving it wide open for discussion via Zoom. But let's hear from Todd on those things which were submitted yesterday. I may have staff to ask staff to respond briefly to them. Some of them may just be noted as you have now communicated and expressed your sentiment to the Board of Control. But let's go through those items, Todd, that you received yesterday.
Okay, thank you, Dave. And I have addressed them in different categories. And the first category is the submitted information and requests from a non-school competition. And the first is from Scott Holler at Oak Creek. I'd like to speak at the open forum tomorrow, and that's what we have here, to reiterate the importance of the Board of Control's future decision on non-school competitions during the tournament series for the spring of 2021. With the board's decision to move the spring season dates, baseball and softball in particular will suffer participation losses to travel teams if the Board of Control does not allow student athletes to utilize their two events of non-school competition through the WIAA tournament series. While it may seem insignificant in it only being one season, many of us close to the travel ball scene know that this could lead to strong push from travel organizations attempting to lure more and more students away from their high school teams, altogether moving forward in the future years. So for this one season only, the Board of Control truly need to allow those two non-school events to carry through into the tournament series. Also have one from non-school competitions from Adam King at Racine Case. Junior and seniors who play club ball, which is a spring sport for boys soccer, are going to be forced to choose between an abbreviated high school season and playing club ball. This is a problem because as it stands, there can be two matches of overlap. Spring is the time when college coaches scout the big tournaments, and as a result, if our student athletes choose to play high school, they will miss out. If we have that prohibition waived this spring, they can play in their big tournaments, play their shortened high school season, and salvage a difficult season. On the other hand, in the event that it is not waived, I'm going to advise my college-likely club players to play club and forego the spring high school season as it is in their best interest. I am hopeful we can make a one-year exception on this, as the circumstances that participate this move are not under their control. As their coach and mentor, this is of Racine Case. This is not from Adam King, the athletic director. This would be the best solution given the circumstances and giving them maximum latitude to make the best decision in their own behalf. And the third and last one on non-school competition is from Justin Crandall at Whitewater. Was there going to be a discussion on non-school contests for the alternate fall season? I know my coach has expressed some concern with the alternate volleyball season running into the volleyball club season. So any staff like to respond to that? Appreciate it.
Yeah, Todd, thank you for those. And I have shared in an email to members of the Woodland Conference that the Board of Control has taken up a discussion of this request already at September's last week's board meeting, and got way down into the weeds in that discussion, to the point where they have now asked that it will come back to them at the October meeting. There is interest in providing relief, but the hope and expectations that it be done in a thoughtful manner. This has been a request that has primarily originated in the southeast part of our membership. I'm not positive if many of the school coaches are also club coaches, if there are those conflicts and challenges. We don't know the answer to that. And where the conversation with the board has gone in the first kick at this cat has been looking at certainly the athlete well-being dimension of exposure, overexposure, game and meet individual maximums, and those sorts of things, but also from a membership-wide perspective. Does this adversely tilt the competitive balance for the added opportunities and high-level opportunities that some members might receive? So the conversation is going to be resumed, as you know, and we will also talk again in a few minutes about the non-school competition. The board has already extended that from 2 games or contests to 2 events, which opens it up to a weekend tournament sort of exposure. But the board will be revisiting this and taking it up once again in the October meeting. And so they are aware of the question, the interest presented by some members. They have taken it upon themselves to have a very, very thorough and comprehensive conversation, and we will look forward to some final determination at the October meeting with regard to the non-school competition extending into the WIAA tournament series. Keeping in mind that to this point, that non-school rule has been founded on the idea that when a youngster is a part of a school's team, the member's expectation has been that their primary loyalty and allegiance is owed to the school team, where where the success of all of us may rise and fall on the feet or the arms or the whatever skills of the most talented in our group. But it will be coming back in October. Next one, Todd. You might need to unmute, Todd.
Yep. We're looking at 2020 and 2021 amendments. Comment from Jason Block at Racine Lutheran. He writes, I have 2 amendments that were to be brought forward to the annual meeting last year by petition. I am assuming they will be placed on the agenda for 2021. Both of these amendments dealt with how the Board of Control passes sport rule changes. I simply want to make it clear at the area meetings that as people consider these amendments this year, that they are in no way crafted to try to limit the powers of the Board of Control. I personally think they have done a fabulous job making decisions through all the COVID situations. The intent of the amendments is to rein in the coaches committees and give the ADs an ability to give more input before something gets all the way to the Board of Control. Thank you.
We will be sharing the amendments in a little bit later, and that one is included in there. So as we review those, you'll see that.
Okay.
Moving along to football, Dave, if I may.
Yep.
Have a question from Jared Gussie at Northeastern Wisconsin Lutheran. Is it possible to separate 8-man football into a large and small division based on size and having 2 divisions of playoff?
Wade?
Right. At this time, we have discussed that with the Coaches Association, and we're going to, again, discuss it in December. But right now, the numbers, there's 39 currently going to play football, 8-player football this year. And they don't justify to have 2 divisions. But it's an ongoing discussion that we will continue to have. And when do we eliminate this Division 7 and possibly include another division for 8 players? So it's a constant discussion that we're having.
Thank you, Wade. I've got another one from Ryan McMillan at Muskego. He said, please provide an update on the state football tournament planning. Rumor is 3 dates of playoffs to make an 8-team bracket could be on the table. Wade, you want to handle that?
At this point, we're just going to be, with the number of dates we have, we're going to have 7 games during the regular season. And we will be going to 2 levels of the tournament season. The board did tell us that our groupings should be in groups of 8 and for football groups of 4. So I anticipate we will have level 1 in 4 groups in the 32 or in the 32s. So we will take and put level 1 in the groups of 4. The winners will play each other in round 2 for level 2. That's what I'm anticipating. I'm going to talk a little bit more with the coaches to see if we do have the people who have lost in the first round compete in the second round. That's an option. We also have talked about it. If you are not in the playoffs, you can continue to schedule games in the tournament. So schools in the fall could go ahead and get 9 games in if they so chose. So that's where we're at right now, but we don't anticipate that we will have a state tournament.
Thanks, Wade. We have one more football-related question. It is clear we do not have to start football around August 1st date to have a season. Starting so early is a deterrent to players and coaches. The early start date needs to change, and this is submitted by Dave Judds of Iowa, Scandinavia. Wade?
Again, we're in discussions of that in December. This year, after going through the football-only conference realignment, the coaches were going to bring up the potential of moving to 8 games. That's why we have done it in the 8-player, was to go ahead and see how that worked and to see if participation numbers are up. There is no data that says that the participation will go up. There is no data that says that it's going to be any better, but it is a discussion point again, and we were going to have that on the agenda for the football coaches in December of this year. So we may see some movement. We may not. It's with this year, things are a little bit different, but it's been a topic, and that's why 8 players now down to 8 games.
Okay, want to move on. We got a question for counting contact days. This is from Jeff Bisek of De Pere High School. Question is, are we counting the new contact days as we always have? For example, we have 2 cohort groups, Monday through Thursday, and then Tuesday through Friday. No in-person on Wednesdays. Or Tuesday and Friday, but no in-persons on Wednesdays. And activities can only be done in cohort groups. In order to get to everyone on the prospective team, you need 2 days to accomplish what would have been done in 1 contact day. So it's Monday and Thursday and Tuesday and Friday, Wade.
And we did discuss that at the board meeting, and the board did say that the school should have flexibility in order to go ahead and do their contact days. Normally, a contact day is counted the same for all levels of the program. So if you have a contact day on Monday, freshmen, JV, and varsity are all on that same Monday, and that whole day counts. So in this situation where we have cohorts on different days, we would tell you that as long as those students remain in those co-ops, you can count the days for that cohort and count that as one, and keep a separate count for the other cohort as another one. And you get 15 of those. If you mix them together, then it counts as one for both. If a kid misses a day, that's not, they don't get to make that up. So those days are assigned. So I would recommend that you, on a calendar, you do go ahead and put or track on which days you're doing which cohorts, and do not go above 15 for either cohort. If you're not using the blended format, then you would count as single days. I hope that's clear.
Okay, that takes care of the counting contact days submission. Want to move into the volleyball tournaments subject. I know a survey was sent out about volleyball state tournament and the choices we have as a district. My concern is, along with our administrators, are the expectation of limited fans, safety protocols, etc., to be followed by the regional and sectional tournaments as well. That will play into how we vote. And that's submitted by Randy Gable of Barneveld.
Steph.
Remember that, Randy, your vote is really just to help us with our planning and preparation in the tournament. Certainly, we understand as a staff that when schools declare whether they're in or out for the tournament or even to what level, we know that might change for your school as the tournament series progresses. I want you to know that our staff is talking about those protocols and those expectations related to COVID for the WIAA tournament series. Definitely going to work with our sports medical advisory committee as well. So as soon as we have a more concrete guidance for you on that, we'll provide that to schools. But at this time, please know that your vote is not something you're going to be held to. It's just asking for guidance so we can begin our planning and preparation for the tournament series.
Okay, another topic that we had sent in, and there's a couple submissions addressing this, is the breaking news from our WIAA, either events or from board meetings and so forth. Melissa Gehring from Beaver Dam asks, is there a way to not have the media break news of pertinent motions or decisions on social media prior to the WIAA's official release of information to athletic directors, principals, and superintendents? That would be largely huge help locally. For example, our team learned of the cancellation of the girls' state basketball tournament in their hotel rooms on Twitter on Friday. I had coaches asking about contact days before I could even read the detailed information on the motion to answer inquiries last Friday. And also on that same topic, Justin Crandall from Whitewater, has there been any discussion about continuing to stream the Board of Control meetings? It was nice having those streamed during the summer meetings. I hate having to rely on tweets from the media for in-meeting updates.
We have, Mr. Clark has reached out and asked the media. We have attempted to explain the annoyance as well as the consternation and at times confusion that that can arise as a result of a premature text or tweet going out, and the frustration that that arises with that. The way of canceling that is to not provide access to the media to our meetings, and require everybody to wait until the official release is able to come out. Now that sounds easy enough, but I'm not positive that it is in the greater best interest of the membership to close things down and to be create the appearance of being more secretive. to answer. So, we will continue to ask and request that they refrain from needing to push out texts and tweets that may not capture or contain the full context of a discussion or the full context of a decision that contribute both to the annoyance and the confusion that arises out there. We have heard you, we recognize it. The conversation, we have not had a conversation about putting all of the Board of Control meetings out on live stream. We have had negative experiences, with that as well. When individuals are not able to contain or restrain themselves during a conversation, and the texts or tweets and emails that come in to us from our own members can be disruptive and distracting to a conversation, as much as media prematurely putting out information. But we have not had that conversation. If the board wishes to, they certainly are able to have that conversation and see where we go forward from here. And in particular, in this year, where every decision appears to be of utmost interest and importance, it is a conversation that the board is certainly able to have.
Okay, thanks, Dave. If you wish, we can move along to co-op rules, another submitted topic. This comes from Jordan Hine at Franklin. We would like the WIAA executive staff to address the inequity of application of co-op rules across individual sports. Specifically, if a co-op rule is instituted or adjusted, we believe that it should be added to the general bylaws that govern all sports and approved by the membership. This would create equity across all sports and genders. Current practices includes inserting co-op restrictions to tournament procedures, which restricts the access and participation of that specific sport and or gender of athlete. It is in the best interest of the membership to develop and implement fair and equal cooperative team guidelines. Somebody want to address that?
Steph, is that anything, I'm assuming, though it's not spelled out, I'm assuming this relates to gymnastics and the adjustment to divisional placement and tournament access from the volleyball coaches.
I'm guessing it's for gymnastics, Dave. I guess my only comment at this point would be that I know 2 years ago at the area meetings when we asked the question statewide, if you're looking for more uniform decisions across all sports or more sport specific decisions coming from this office, it was a large majority that said that there's a hope that we look more individually at sports versus across all sports. I don't know if that sentiment has changed, but certainly that's maybe something we need to revisit as a staff if that's the direction we're trending. Jordan, certainly if there is something with gymnastics in particular that you'd like us to revisit, direct that to our office, specifically to me or to the Gymnastics Coaches Advisory Committee so that we can put that back on our agenda. We did discuss it at this past year's agenda, and it was actually a recommendation made by one of our new members who comes from a large co-op. And she asked that we monitor the data for the next 2 years to really look closely to see if the decision that's been made with regard to co-ops is indeed helping the participation numbers in the sport of gymnastics. That was the intent of the change, was to promote participation rather than to limit it. And the committee didn't feel that we haven't really enough data yet to know if it is doing what they intended it to do. So again, the hope is that it helps the sport, not a detriment to the sport. If we find it's a detriment to the sport, then certainly we need to revisit that because that is not the intention of the committee in making that recommendation.
Thanks, Stephanie. Dave, do you have anything to add on that?
Nope, go on.
Okay, we're moving forward on the list here. And we have a couple winter sports-related questions from Sue Mefford at Lodi High School. First one is, any discussion of moving winter sports start date to January 1st?
Sue, no, there has not, but certainly a member may elect when they wish to activate their own programs. We have had multiple conversations now as a board and with the staff regarding the calendars that were developed, and staff spent a great amount of time moving all of the puzzle pieces around the board, trying to get what is, at least on paper, the most optimum calendar for events that and our opportunities in this unusual year that were able to be identified. The board has said and reaffirmed that the current calendar is the calendar. And it's identified starting and ending dates are the dates that they have directed staff who needs to be working on what's coming next, whether it be the culminating events, the tournament opportunities, or the next sports season guidance and regulations, to allow the staff to proceed with a fairly stable deck and platform underneath them. And so those dates on the calendar are what the board has approved and what we are operating off of. If any member wishes to delay the start of their own program, that is certainly a local choice and decision that can be made, and may be made in concert with other neighboring members. But right now there is not a discussion of pushing the winter sports later into January. By the same token, the board has heard some requests to, move it up earlier. Let basketball begin in time for Thanksgiving tournaments. Let softball, adjust their schedule a little bit, or let soccer adjust their schedule a little bit. We recognize that the calendar that the staff has put together may not be the ideal in each and every sport coach's mind. But in order to try to provide opportunities for kids, and for the kids in those communities and those districts that are not able to start, that need that alternate sports season, the schedules that the staff put together are the best that could be identified, and the board is supportive of keeping those dates as identified. Todd?
All right. The second one then from Sue regarding winter sports. When will the specific recommendations for winter and spring sports come out? Hoping to have some similar to what was sent out for the fall sports.
Wade?
Well, we did submit those to the Sports Medical Advisory a week and a half ago. And so they're being reviewed at the Medical Advisory. Keep in mind that we've just got the fall done. And I think our staff has done an outstanding job of getting their sports-specific items in. And the doctors have been doing the general guidelines and helping us out. But they've just returned to full clinic. That means that they're catching up on appointments that were scheduled in March, April, and May, June. So we have to be a little bit patient for those doctors to go ahead and get some review in there. But I anticipate that we'll have those ready by the end of next week. As far as the spring sports, it'll probably take us a month to get through those as well. But we're hoping to have the winter pretty soon.
Okay, if that clears the slate for the winter sport guidelines submissions, we're going to the spring season and the revised schedule category. This one comes from Kurt Thompson of Riverdale. Is there a way to keep the WIAA baseball state tournament in Appleton on the dates it was originally scheduled instead of extending the spring baseball season to the end of June? I have talked to a number of coaches, and they would much rather have a shortened season and regular WIAA tournament series instead of a season that runs into the end of June. Concerning our kids would opt for summer baseball, family vacations, and other sport camps. The spring season was eliminated last year, so it would be nice to have regular and normal tournament series this year if possible.
Wade.
Well, I think Dave has covered the discussion about changing the dates of the seasons, whether it's fall, winter, or spring. We have had several discussions at the board level and at the staff level about whether or not we should move those tournaments. I have talked to the stadium over there, Fox City Stadiums, and we do have dates reserved for the last week of June. I do anticipate that that's what we'll do if at all possible. We would like to have our baseball on there, but right now we're going with the alternate schedule that the board did approve, and that's where we're at.
Thanks, Wade. On a related topic, I know Brian Motz had sent an update or a chat indicated about girls tennis maybe starting at a later date. March 9th seemed to be very early. Tom Shafransky had responded into the chat. Tom indicated that he is working with the tennis coaches advisory committee on the spring dates. However, currently they do wish to keep the girls tennis dates as they are. So that's all the submissions we have, Dave, from the open forum. Thank you.
Thanks, Todd, and thanks everyone for contributing these questions, these sentiments under the way things currently are. And we continue to learn as we work into a Zoom universe, and are grateful for the opportunity to be able to receive your feedback and respond to the questions and or have the comments entered into the record of membership concerns. And we will continue to evaluate and deconstruct this large-scale membership meeting and see what we can do better the next time. But for now, we appreciate the open forum remarks, and with that, we can move on to the proposed constitutional amendments. Wade?
Right, and I'm going to pull them up as soon as I can figure out where they are on my computer. The current ones that we have are defining boarding schools, transition to the single gender, the residency rule, and boarding schools for 11th grade. A membership petition for basketball, a membership petition that Jason Block did pull up. So I'm going to try to share those with you as soon as I can, like I said, find that on my screen. There we go. So the first one here is the residential definition. Remember, this would define residential schools since we have multiple schools that are beginning to have dormitories and want to become titled as a residential school. Keep in mind that the residential school currently, if they are boarding, the boarding school becomes the parent, and therefore the guardian rule is waived. And this would state that a residential school is defined as a school which provides residential community setting for students in a full range of boarding services, dormitory, 3 meals a day, 24 hours of supervision, etc. And that would be at 25 students or 10%, whichever is larger of the full student enrollment that live in full time on the school. As you can see, we did get through the various committees. So the sports advisory approved it, the advisory council approved it, and the board of control approved it for advancing to the annual meeting, and they supported it. So that's the first one. The second one is the membership transitioning to a co-ed school. So if we have a single gender school, then this rule would be the process to follow when going from a single gender to a co-ed school. And that rule would add a note that says when transitioning from a single gender school to a co-ed school, the enrollment of the original gender population will be doubled for classification purposes until such a time that all enrollment reaches a 60-40 ratio between both genders. And until that time, the gender underrepresented will be classified and assigned as face value. We did use some data on our membership, and a 60-40 ratio was the largest difference in our co-ed schools, so that's why we came up with that. You can see how the various committees did vote on that to advance and to support it. The third one was a school classification for basketball. This was brought forward by a petition as well, so it will go on to the membership. This one does propose for boys and girls basketball a reclassification model. As you can see, the terminology that would be forwarded would be beginning in the 21-20 school year. Obviously, that will need to be changed. The school year, the competitive balance formula, which includes a success factor, shall be used for purposes of classifying senior high schools for purposes of membership, representation, and competition. So they're going to use the third Friday count. You would identify the free and reduced lunch rate. And if the free and reduced lunch rate exceeds the previous year's average, the school's enrollment shall be reduced by the percentage of the difference of the free and reduced lunch. If the school's free and reduced lunch does not exceed the previous year's, then the school's enrollment will not be modified. Then you will go ahead and classify the schools based on a division allocation formula here. The largest 96 will go into D1, the next 64 into D2, and then 128 for the smallest division, D5. And then you would split the next two divisions, 3 and 4, in half. In addition to that, there's a calculation for success factors. And then the success factor is going to be calculated on the points over a 3-year period. You'll have points awarded for tournament success, 4 for state title, 3 for state championship game, 2 for state semi, 1 for the sectional final game. And that will go ahead and be used to factor in. So you'll use the third Friday count, then you use the free and reduced, and then you apply the success factor and you move them to divisions. Co-op teams, then this was language from the previous success factor that was brought forward. So as you can see on the committees, because it's a petition, it's going to advance to the annual meeting. The support was 0-14 in sports advisory. Advisory council was 12-4 with no stance. Board of control was 10-0 with no stance on there, meaning that they're not taking a position. That is for the membership to decide because the membership brought it forward. The fourth amendment brought forward, as I said, was a petition. I believe this is the one Jason Block was talking about from Racine. This one would require that all changes in rules and regulations must pass the advisory council by majority vote. The Board of Control for a vote. Any amendments or proposals that are made and approved by the board would have to be sent back to the advisory council for their approval. So we would add in the second piece there, number 2, that all changes to the WI rules and regulations must first pass by a majority of the advisory council before being advanced to the board. Any amendments made to proposals by the board must be returned to advisory council for their approval. And then underneath powers and duties of the board, the advisory council shall vote and approve by majority vote any changes in the rules and regulations before the proposals are sent to the board. So this basically means that any rules and regulations must be approved by the advisory council rather than by the Board of Control. You can see that the sports advisory was 0-14 to support, advisory council 0-17 to support, Board of Control support. And the board did decide to weigh in on this, and they do not support this adoption. In addition to that, number 5 was game meet changes. This was also brought forward by petition. I believe this was brought forward by Jason as well. This would require that all changes made to maximum game limits, as well as any WIAA adaptations to NFHS rules, which would lead to financial impact on schools, must go to the annual meeting for a vote by the entire membership. So again, any changes, you would add the shaded area, any change approved by the Board of Control on maximum game meet limits or in WIAA adaptations to the NFHS, which by their enactment would result in additional cost to be incurred by the schools, must be approved at the annual or be advanced to the annual meeting for a vote. Again, You can see the committee votes is 014, 017, 010, and the board did weigh in, and they do not support this adoption. Number 6, residence eligibilities for non-public students. This is a boarding school change. When we did change the residence rule to bring that into compliance or to meet the transfer rule with the 6th consecutive semester of allowing non-varsity. This change here inadvertently provided unrestricted eligibility for 11th graders going into a boarding school. And in order to make it the same as non-public schools and public schools, this again would require that a junior transfers to a boarding school would be non-varsity because they're not living with their parent. It would bring it in line with the other schools that have a residency issue with a student. So you can see the advance and the support by the committees was unanimous, and that is to support the changes. Editorial changes that were coming forward, changing the word sex to gender when referring to schools that have one gender or co-ed purposes. Another change down here is a change recommended by legal counsel that it is a violation when a student or parent falsifies records and provides misleading information, and it will result in the student being ineligible. Then there is a shaded area here that a student does not serve a penalty for violation by leaving the state and competing in another state will be ineligible for the balance when they return in. So that is a timeout procedure, I guess, for students that try to run away from their suspension by enrolling in an out-of-state school and then coming back. Another editorial change is in the foreign exchange section, that if a foreign exchange student has already used 1 year experience at any time, the transfer rule and residency rule will apply to succeeding placement. It's the same rule, but this is just clarifying what we already do. And then we're also adding in the word office into the appeal process because others do waivers as well as the executive director. And we do want people to be understood that when the waiver is denied or something is done in the office, you have 15 days from the original receipt. Some people like to submit multiple documents on a regular basis, and that does not extend the 15-day procedure from when you are from the original date. So those are the constitutional amendments and where we're at for this upcoming annual meeting.
Thanks, Wade. To this point in time, we have only identified one new provision to bring forward to the membership to add to this list that would be considered a new amendment in the 2020-2021 calendar year, and that is that the board has taken emergency action to modify our language within our code of conduct to allow schools to go through the investigation of a school-based sexual assault, sexual harassment complaint or concern before applying their code of conduct. And so that one will need to be added to this list and brought forward to the members at whatever the next time is that we are able to conduct our annual business meeting. But these would be the carryover amendments that we briefed you on last year and vetted throughout the course of our member-wide conversations last year. One other note, two other notes actually. I received an email from Mr. Steve Pack, our Board of Control District 4 rep, that he is also the COVID lead person for his district, and he was detained from joining us right at 9, but he has joined us for the majority of our meetings thus far, and welcome, welcome, Dave. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
The other thing to note in this conversation, in our introduction of our meeting agenda, we had identified game maximum, game meet process, and that is related to some of the requests for controlling the addition of games and the influence of the sport coaches themselves. And that will be a conversation that we will begin taking up when we meet with sports advisory here in the coming weeks. And a membership-wide conversation, how to address those concerns, which we have heard from members, and how best to move forward with that. It may or may not result in a constitutional amendment, but it may result in a different process to be followed when our sport executives are meeting with coaches and fielding the requests from them with regard to game and meet maximums. We can do a better job of informing and engaging all in that conversation. So let's move on then if we can. We have some staff updates. And I've asked all of the staff to, as you well know and might imagine, they are receiving a lot of questions each and every day from members with regard to the fall sports, with regard to the winter sports, with regard to culminating events and all those sorts of things. So let's run down the list. And Wade, let's start with you and what's going on in your world right now.
Oh my, there's a lot going on there. Right now in fall sports, football has begun. We do have 68% of our football schools going on and offering football in the fall. For those that started on September 7th, your first game will be this week. So I'm looking forward to getting out and hopefully being able to see a couple games and observe some officials. I've kind of missed that on Friday nights. It's been a long fall without football. As I stated earlier, we anticipate we'll have two levels of football, level 1 and level 2. We are anticipating on using the football database to go ahead and determine a field of 224. And we will divide them into groups of 4 to keep them more regional and have 2 games in that group of 4. The winners will advance to the second level. As I did talk about earlier, if a school does not qualify for the playoffs or if they lose the first round, they would have the opportunity to play another game in round 2 if they so decide. So the spring football season does start March 8th, and there will not be tournament games involved in there. The main reason for that is that the season we want it to end so we have some distance between the spring football season and between the fall football season. We don't want overexposure to come into effect there. So we'll only have 7 games in the spring. So we want to keep that in mind. Also, we sent out an email earlier, I believe Todd did, about the 50%. If the school has started the season and practices and they have a bona fide football schedule and they have officials assigned and so forth and so on, and that season has to be paused for a COVID-related quarantine, the season pauses there. So if you miss a game during that time period or during the 2 weeks, you miss 2 games and you don't have those practices, the season is paused, and then you will continue on when you can return. If you end your season with less than 50%, which in football I believe is 6 weeks and or 4 football games, and you don't get that accomplished, then you will be able to go into the spring alternate season, but you will be limited to the first 2 weeks of practice and then whatever the amount of games are that you did not get. So if you get 3 games in the fall, you will only get 4 football games in the spring. That is different for the other sports. But again, the concern is the overexposure for the student athletes. So I think I've covered everything in football. The Sports Medical Advisory Committee did meet. They've been doing an outstanding job. As you know, right from the very beginning, when the first discussions on basketball and the girls tournament and boys tournament continuing, the Sports Medical has been working full speed with us to develop those summer contact guidelines, which the staff contributed greatly for their sports. And the doctors did the general guidelines and reviewed those. And then we went ahead and created the sport specific right away in July. From there, immediately, we went to the fall guidelines. And they are fluid guidelines. We were asking them to review the limitations on restrictions on dual meets and quads and tries and on invitationals. We have had some successful golf tournaments with more than two teams or three teams, and we're hoping that we might be able to get some decisions on possibly increasing those amounts, which obviously are necessary to hold regionals and sectionals and a state tournament. So I do anticipate we'll have our winter guidelines out shortly, and then we will move right on to the spring guidelines. We also did have the sports medical did develop, and the board did approve on Friday, a CBD oil or CBD product restriction upon the recommendation of the Sports Medical Advisory Committee. You must have a prescription to use CBD oil. Otherwise, it is a banned substance. So you want to make sure that any students that are using CBD products have a prescription from an appropriate healthcare provider. So just keep that in mind. The other topic that we have on the list is Title IX directives. As you know, the Department of Education at the federal level did make a change, and Dave alluded to this, in their Title IX guidelines regarding sexual harassment. And what that is essentially telling the schools is that you can't just apply rules and penalties to a potential perpetrator or a potential student without giving them the ability to be heard. And we've had discussions among legal counsel throughout the state and our legal counsel. And sexual harassment under Title IX means the conduct on the basis of sex that satisfies one or more of the following: an employee of the district conditioning the provision of an aid, benefit, or service by another employee's participation in unwelcome sexual conduct. Unwelcome sexual conduct is that is so severe, pervasive, or objectively offensive that it effectively denies a person equal access to education, program, or activity. And that sexual assault is defined as dating violence and domestic violence, stalking, etc. So essentially what is coming down is the student must have the opportunity to be heard. And, you know, with our felony rule, the felony rule says that if they are charged or convicted, they are out automatically. This interpretation here that we're bringing forward that the board has approved will allow that the schools to provide that relief in circumstances that this is applied to. So in our discussion, it was talking about when a school has actual knowledge of sexual harassment in an education program or activity of the recipient against a person, the educational program or activity is defined to include locations, events, circumstances that the recipient exercised substantial control over, both the respondent in the context of which the sexual harassment occurs, and also includes any building owned or controlled by the student organization that is officially recognized in their educational community. So what we are going to do is add a note that says this. This rule is subject to this and superseded by the requirement and limitations imposed on the school by Department of Education regulations promulgated under Title IX relating to how schools must respond to allegations of sexual harassment consistent with Part 106 of Title 34 of the Code of Federal Regulations. So if somebody is being sexually harassed in the school, on the school bus, on the way to a football game, or on the way back from a volleyball game, they are under your control. And if those students are brought in, the person that is accused of violating that has to be provided the opportunity to be heard and has to be provided those rights that the Department of Education has guaranteed them. And that's what this choice is going to deal with. We'll explain in more detail at the annual meeting, but you are already under this, underneath this guidance by the Department of Education, and we felt that it was important that schools have the ability to go ahead and act according to this directive. Keep in mind, this does not remove the felony rule. So if a student is charged and they've had the opportunity to be heard by the district attorney and is convicted by a court, then the rule still does apply for a felony. So it doesn't remove that rule. This is really guiding you to make sure that you don't just determine that they're guilty without providing that they do have the ability to be heard through your school process. And I'm sure that your schools have already been talking about this. Dave, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, only that, well, first off, with regard to this specific Department of Ed Title IX clarification, if you will, it's not a suggested practice, it's a requirement. But it is not as broad as was initially perhaps understood or concerned for. It is specific to sexual assault, sexual harassment, and it is specific to assault or harassment, in your building, in your program, on your buses. It does not to those activities and facilities that the school is responsible for. It is not a requirement. As an example, if a youngster comes in and shares that they were sexually assaulted at a party on Saturday night in another student's home, that is not under the school control. So it is specific to sexual assault and harassment, and it is specific to programs and events and or buses and so on that are under the school district's control. And thank you to all of you who have shared the notice that the governor's mask ordinance has been extended now to November 21. I have put that out. We did get that from the governor's office a short while ago, and have shared it with the board and advisory council and WIAA leadership as well as the staff. So the mask ordinance has been extended with the back to school bump up of the COVID rates. We will continue to encourage our members to recognize and adhere to all of the mitigation protocols that have been in place and we all recognize and are aware of since all of this has begun. It's been one of the few things that hasn't changed. Let's move on with updates. How about Steph?
Dave, before we jump into staff, I'd like to have Wade respond to a question that came on the chat. For those of us who just started football and will not start games until October 9th, with them having 5 games total, now how will that affect the postseason qualifying?
Right now, our intention is just to use the overall record. So for, in the past, we've used conference schedules, but we're going to consider that the schedule that you have applied is going to be the schedule that you are using. So as in we have in the past, if there were 5 conference games, we used 5 conference games, while some used 9 conference games. So we still do have that in the qualifying criteria, and we will be using that. So instead of using a conference schedule, where you're going to use your overall schedule. So if you only manage to get 5 games in, you're undefeated, you're probably going to be in the playoffs, right? If you are at the 500 level on your record, then the criteria is going to go ahead and go through the computer and pull you out. So it's going to all be based on what your overall schedule is. And we thank the people who have come up with creative schedules. I know in the Southeast or Southwest, we have a couple district or conferences that went together. 3 conferences went together so they could offer a fall and a spring schedule. And the SWAL went ahead and accepted Lancaster and Darlington, so we appreciate that to give those kids their opportunities. But we will use the overall schedule as we will consider that to be your conference schedule for this year. You can locally decide whether you're going to do awards or conference champions or whatever that is. But essentially, we're just going to use your overall record.
Thanks, Wade. There's a couple other questions that came in the chat. If you want to answer those on the chat, and then we can move forward to Stephanie.
Yeah, I'm one of those. I would have to restart. I don't have the chat option on my screen because I'm doing the PowerPoint. So.
Okay, then I'll read them to you and see if you can respond. Is there a minimum games lost due to COVID?
No, I'm not. I'm not aware of. We didn't discuss that.
The other one, we have a team that cannot play us due to COVID quarantine. Is that a forfeit win for our school since they cannot play?
Right. For playoff qualifying purposes, that would be a forfeit win. And if you schedule somebody else, then you can record that on how you'd normally do it. But the coaches last December, and it was approved by the board, that any forfeit once the schedules are set will count as a forfeit win for playoff qualifying.
Okay, thank you. Another one just came in as well, Dave, based on your comments about the governor's extending the mask mandate from John Hoke. I look like the governor just extended the mask mandate for another 60 days, which takes us through the rest of the volleyball and first week of basketball. Has there been any communication between the WIAA and Ever's office about allowing athletes indoors, competing indoors, to be exempt from the mandates?
No, not to this point in time, Todd. We have heard a little bit from our Sport Medical Advisory Committee. Obviously, as is to be expected with everything to do with COVID and masks and precautions, there is some research out that is emerging about the wearing of masks and wearing masks in sport activity and working to exertion and so on. And despite the unusual, and to sum it up, despite the unusual feeling of it, the initial adverse impressions of it, the research that we have seen to this point identifies no harm, no measurable loss of O2 absorption and acquisition and those sorts of things. But to answer the question, to this point in time, there has not been a conversation or exchange with the governor's office relating to specifically to allowing athletes indoors to not wear masks.
Thank you. Stephanie?
Let's move on with Steph.
Thank you. I'll give you as brief of an update as I can for volleyball and some reference to some resources that we've got for you as well. Certainly the theme for 2020 is everything looks different. We understand that it's looking different in our schools, and it's certainly looking different for our sports seasons as well. For the girls volleyball season, we've got 353 teams that are participating this fall. That's about 75% overall. And the boys teams, we have 40 teams, which is at approximately 67%. We have worked with the Volleyball Coaches Advisory Committee to get input for the tournament structure. At this time, we've got 4 divisions evenly divided, 88 schools in divisions 1, 2, and 3, and 89 in division 4. That afforded us the opportunity to provide complete brackets and also very small regional groupings. In the girls, that's 5 or 6 teams. On the boys' side, that's 7 or 8 teams. So it allowed those groupings to be more regionally based. We hope that that helps schools for travel. Big question is state tournament. What's going to happen with the state tournament? And I wish I had an answer. Of course I don't, because COVID seems to change things daily. So what we've tried to do is take a layered approach. Certainly the ideal is that we'll have a culminating event at the Resch Center and a celebration of the conclusion of the boys and girls volleyball season. That would be ideal. Clearly nothing seems to be ideal these days, and so what we've done is kind of do a layered approach. We'll peel back the layers. If indeed it becomes apparent that that is not going to be a feasible option, we're going to look at a state tournament in 5 different sites. The boys playing somewhere, the girls division 1, 2, 3, and 4 also playing in their own site. So we would have no more than 4 teams on the girls' side and 6 teams on the boys' side playing for a state championship at their own venue. So again, limiting the number of spectators and the number of teams in one site. If that's not feasible, we peel it back another layer and we look at just completing the sectionals and crowning sectional champions and nothing beyond that this year. And again, one step further back from that would be the regional champions, which again, as I mentioned, is very geographically centered as best as we could. There are some challenges in the state geographically to do that, but in most cases, we were able to put small groups of teams from a close area together. The final layer that we would peel back is that there is no WIAA tournament series at all this year. And then schools would be allowed to just continue to schedule games up until the conclusion of the volleyball season on November 9th. As mentioned earlier, our staff will be meeting tomorrow to begin discussing COVID tournament protocol for the sport of volleyball indoors. Certainly the governor's announcement probably will have influence on that, what we look at doing with regard to masks. But again, we will address questions such as spectators and allowing schools to maintain social distancing for spectators. We'll get that to you as soon as we can. We just don't have that yet. Another question I've gotten is, what if a lot of teams opt out this fall? What's going to happen? What will the tournament series look like? Again, those 4 divisions that we've outlined right now, that's where things are at today. If we lose a lot more teams between now and October 20th, we'll start with combining regional groupings. Next step is we'll combine sectional groupings. And finally, if we need to, we will combine divisions. We will scale back the number of divisions. So again, those are all things that we'll have to adjust basically on a daily basis, just like all of you are doing in your schools right now. We'll take it to some extent day by day, but having that broad plan that we can peel back as needed. We've gotten a lot of COVID specific volleyball questions. We've placed that on the volleyball girls and boys page under rules and regulations, under Q&A. It's its own tab. And they are questions from officials about wearing masks, or how do they blow a whistle, and girls wearing masks on the court, and how to socially distance your team bench. So again, they are specific to volleyball. All they do is offer interpretations for you to specific situations from the fall return to sport guidelines that you've already seen from our office. And then the second most common question I'm getting is, what about the spring? What's that going to look like? And again, I would tell you, we don't know. A lot of that will be dependent upon how many teams ultimately opt into the spring. At this point, we only have 25% of the girls' teams and about 1/3 of the boys' teams who have opted into the spring. That may change between now and the end of this volleyball season. So again, we will revisit what the spring is going to look like down the road. We have reserved a week of tournament play if needed. We have reserved that. So again, we'll revisit that once this fall has completed. If you have any questions in the meantime, please send them to me. I'll do my best to get back to you quickly. Thanks for all of you for the efforts you are putting forth. And please keep sharing the pictures on social media that you have been. Our office has seen so many pictures of everybody in attendance complying with the parameters that are set forth by the host school to try to give these boys and girls the opportunity to keep on playing this fall. So thanks for the extra efforts that all of you are putting forth.
Thanks, Steph. Tom.
Glad to, Dave. Thanks very much. Thanks, everyone, once again for being with us. We've got some tournament series that are ready to begin this week. We're taking entries for girls golf. Those will be coming our way tomorrow. And if you aren't aware, we have moved because of UW not being able to host in Madison at the venues that we've used previously. We'll be moving the state golf meet, if we're able to get to that point, over to Kohler and Black Wolf Run, thanks to Matt for all of his help organizing that. As far as girls golf goes, we have modified Division I. Division II has virtually all the teams that were scheduled to play in Division II ready to go, but Division I was cut down, and so we only have 4 sectionals. They have about 66% of the teams playing, and so we've got 4 sectionals in Division I. meaning that we have 8 teams in Division 2 and 6 teams in Division 2 and 8 teams in Division 1 advancing to state, along with 9 individuals and 12 individuals in Division 1, 9 individuals in Division 2. So those are some of the changes that we have accomplished in girls golf and our planning during the weeks ahead. We have been able to identify sites, regional sites and sectional sites for all of our golf meets. And thanks to all those folks who are willing to host those teams. As far as tennis is concerned, October 5th and 6th is when girls tennis begins with subsectional play, and then advances to sectionals the 2 days that follow, the 7th and the 8th, and then state. This year now the Division 1 state tournament, we're going to split them up because of the limited amount of indoor facilities available. We do need to have indoor facilities in case of inclement weather. We are going to look at indoor and outdoor play this year, and that will be for D1 at Lake Geneva, at the Lake Geneva Tennis Center and High School. Thanks to Jim Kluge for his help there. And then Matt, once again, has been willing to help us get the Sport Corps in Kohler to help us with Division 2. So we will be looking at organizing things based upon weather as that week comes in. We also are looking to reduce Division 1 once again to 4 sectionals instead of 8, but we will also be playing and in having 40 individual singles players and 40 doubles teams advance to a state event. That is down from 56 in past years based upon percentage numbers. We have also, due to the expanded subsectionals that we have because of the lessened number of regionals, regionals and sectionals in Division 1, we are going to be adjusting and using super match tiebreak play, which means there is not a third set. It is a tiebreaker that is played after 2 sets in subsectionals. As Stephanie mentioned, we will be talking about masks and spectators during the week ahead and identifying those 4 host schools and working with them with any local regulations that they might have as well. As far as swimming and diving are concerned, that is starts November 6th and 7th with sectionals, and Todd Sabrilski and Waukesha South have been willing to take that state meet should we be able to host that on the 13th and 14th. Division 2 and Division 1 will remain separate. We have not completed all of the planning for swimming just yet, but it does appear that there will be a reduced number of entries making it in Division 1 simply because we are actually a little bit below 50%. I believe it's 48% for girls swimming in Division 1 that are participating. Division 2, again, has all but 5 teams participating in Division 2. So we're ready to go with tournament play coming up and with these culminating events this year. And we hope that everyone stays well so that we can do that in the weeks ahead.
Thank you, Tom. You know, the staff has been responding as you have, as we all have been, to an ever-changing cycle of news and events and changes within our understanding and our response to the virus. And we will be continuing to do that as staff tries to begin putting together a framework for culminating events. And as we explained to the Board of Control, it is a daily and weekly changing landscape. And so we are communicating that we might not know exactly what the form and format will look like because of our members' ability to participate, members pushing the pause button. And so until we get to about that 30-day window prior to the end of the season, staff is continuing to monitor, to have conversations and to do the best that they are able to have a plan and multiple fallback plans in order to go as far as we might with a culminating event, given the individual and unique characteristics of each and every sport. We wish that we could tell you, here's the plan. You can write it and etch it in stone, but the days and the events that confront all of us make that challenging, if not impossible, for staff to do. But I can tell you that they are working, proceeding in the hopes of being able to accomplish all that we might, and we will keep you informed of it. Kate, how about from your office?
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay? I was having trouble with my microphone. Yep. Okay, great. So I know you're getting a lot of information right now, a lot of individual details about each specific sport. And, you know, from our standpoint, we're responsible for a couple of sports each, and it's ever changing. So I can imagine how it must be with you trying to track, you know, all the changes in all the sports. So we're going to do our best to get you the information that you need. And please feel free to reach out to us, you know, with an email or with a call. We'll try to get back to you if you have questions, or if what we're sharing with you is confusing. I know a lot of you are trying to talk to the coaches and you know, give them the information. And if you want to just send them to us, that's fine. I mean, I'm happy to help answer some questions. So looking at the sports that I'm working on boys soccer first, let's talk about that. 65% of the teams have opted into fall soccer. And I have collaborated with the Soccer Coaches Advisory Committee, which also includes the Coaches Association president, looking at what we have coming back from a divisional breakdown stance. We only had 26 teams participating in the fall from a typical 64. So our Division I was really depleted. And so after much conversation about it, we talked about different options for how to proceed with a tournament. And what we decided upon was to condense the 4 divisions into 3 divisions. So please be sure to check and make sure what division you're now in. It may have changed from our previous assignments. Also, we've revamped the regional and sectional groupings, which you can find on our website, you know, on the boys soccer webpage. And you'll also see that we've tried to create smaller groupings in an effort to create a more localization of games, which I think we're all talking about now. And our sectional grouping, our regional groupings are now 7 to 8 teams. So you'll be starting in a smaller group. As you know, we've sent out, most of you probably have seen that we've sent out in some of our sports, Google Doc, a survey asking you for your feedback. I know we had a question here earlier about, you know, how do we know how many people are going to be allowed, or what are some of the situations when it comes to tournament play. And in our Google Docs that we shared, I know I've done one for soccer and for cross country, I've asked you to identify anything that may be a restriction for you, so that I can see, you know, if we've got people who can't compete with, you know, without masks, or can't compete without, you know, with a certain, over a certain number of fans or something like that. It's important that you share that information with us as we're trying to plan for our tournaments. We're asking questions like, are you able to host, and what are your, you know, what are your restrictions on fans and that type of thing. Feel free to share that information with us as you see fit. In cross country, we have 84% that have opted into the fall.
Katie's killing it. Is she? Keep them by. And then Alex is doing okay. Oh, okay.
I'm not sure who that is, but if you can mute your microphone if you're on another call, that would be great. So 84% of our cross-country teams have opted into fall, and we collaborated again with the Cross-Country Coaches Advisory Committee and also the Coaches Association President, and talked about creating divisional lines that would be a better reflection. We typically have 120 teams in Division I, and we were reduced down to 80 teams based on who's competing in fall. So we tried to take a look at how we could manage the divisions better. And typically it's 30% of our teams are in Division I, 30% are in Division II, and 40% are in Division III. So we decided to keep that percentage model. So we redivisioned in cross country as well. So be aware that your division may have changed in cross country as well as soccer. And then we revamped all of the groupings. So take a look at that. You can see what regional you're in. And actually, let me back up. Let me continue. Sorry. So we also added a round of competition in cross country. Typically, we go right to sectionals, and those groupings can be as many as 25 teams in one site. Just couldn't see a way to make that work. Even if we staggered teams into different races, just felt like the days would be overwhelming. We'd have to run so many races in order to get the tournament that day of competition completed. So we've started with a sub-sectional round and reduced that to 8 to 12 teams, and potentially staggering that into 2 races at the sub-sectional round. I've included in my Google Doc that I'm asking you, the survey that I'm asking you to fill out, I've included a breakdown of what those subsectionals would look like and what the sectionals would look like, so that you can make an informed decision about whether or not you can participate at those levels. The sectional round would only consist of 4 teams and 10 individual runners of each gender at each site. So it is much condensed from what we've had in the past. And then the state tournament would consist of 12 teams and 30 individual runners of each gender. And we are talking about the potential of, taking each division and running it in more than one race. At this point, sports medical will have to advise us on what they will allow us to do as far as how many athletes could be placed at the start line in any given race. And then our model for a potential state tournament would reflect those decisions. I know there's a question in the chat that asks about, will we be using Wisconsin Rapids as a culminating event? And, those questions still have to be answered. Trying to find out how many people will be participating, and then trying to figure out how we would do those races. It looks to me like in order to keep our numbers down, we may have to run more than one race of each division for each gender. And it looks like that would expand the tournament over a period of 3 days if it were at one site, or potentially 3 different sites with 1 day of races for each division. So that we are looking at a few potential changes in those respects.
Thanks, Kate. Cassie, any updates on, as we talk about the reshaping, constantly shape-shifting, culminating event world? What sorts of thoughts and conversations are you looking at with regard to ticketing?
Thanks, Dave. As stated before, our staff is going to meet tomorrow to discuss in more detail about what we will provide the schools who are hosting regional and sectional events. If we get that far in regards to fans and other accommodations, any support and help that we can provide you guys, we're going to plan on doing that. If you are hosting a regional or sectional event, you still must complete the financial form required, if required, for that sport. And also make sure that you double check the season regulations to confirm the The changes this year, we've had ticket price changes for regionals and sectionals, officials, mileage reimbursement changes. So just make sure you double check those before you start collecting all of your information for those events to make sure you're selling tickets for the right price. And if for some reason you are hosting an event in your community or your county will not allow you to host fans, please make sure you do still fill out that financial form so you can be reimbursed for your officials' expenses and your whole school allowance that you still should get. In regards to our state tournament or culminating event ticket sales, we will not sell any tickets in advance like we have in past years. So once we determine whether we're having the event, where the event location is, all of the details, we will share with all the coaches and athletic directors and any fans that we have information for regarding those ticket sales. And that does include our girls basketball tournament, boys basketball tournament, and our individual wrestling tournament. We pre-sell tickets for those many months in advance. So we will not be doing that this year. That does include our season ticket holders for those events. I will be sending out an email today to all athletic directors, coaches, and season ticket holders stating that we will not have those tickets for sale. But if we do host those events, we will let you all know when tickets will be available and what kind of tickets will be available. And that's all that I have for an update.
Thank you, Cassie. For our members, given the uncertainties of venue, of the status of the virus, of the nature of what a culminating event may look like, and also as an acknowledgement of austerity and cost containment for the association, for us to simply put out season tickets for sale as we have normally done, and then have to go about the business of refunding all of those ticket purchases. That comes, as an example, I think from last winter, the credit card fees and postage and so on was in the neighborhood of $45,000 to $50,000 when we were needing to make those refunds. So all things considered, and with the uncertainty of culminating events, the status of them, what admissions may look like and so on, along with the fact of not knowing, I've not told staff that they need to put things out more than 30 days in advance, that it will likely be on a first come, first served basis. The information of who, what, where, when, and how many will be provided to you. But we did not think it prudent to just go about selling tickets as usual, given the uncertainty of the times that we find ourselves in, and needing to further deplete the membership's operating reserve with credit card fees and refunds. So, Joan, how about officials?
Hello, everyone. I have a very brief review for you on the current licensed officials numbers. Overall, for all sports, fall, winter, and spring, about 65% of the officials have renewed their license so far. A breakdown by season shows fall at 77% have renewed, winter at 63%, and spring at 66%. It increases daily, especially for fall, since we're starting to get into competitions. There are officials that license with our office daily. On a positive note, I have quite a good number of newly licensed officials in all sports this year. So people are still licensing, and that's a good thing. On a side note, I just want to remind everybody that no changes have been made to the required number of officials for your contests. So when you start to have contests, the requirement for the number of officials you need to run those events, nothing has changed yet with those numbers. That's it. Thank you for your time.
Joan, there were a number of COVID accommodations that the board approved with respect to officials relicensing, and the understanding of the concerns of some of the officials due to their age and so on. Do you want to just quickly touch on those, please?
You want me to do that now or under COVID accommodations?
do it under COVID accommodations.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure.
Todd, how about any updates on streaming?
Thanks, Dave. There has been a renewed interest in members streaming their events as a method of connecting with their communities with the crowd restrictions with the COVID-19 pandemic. And I believe in talking with members of the NFHS network, it has reported a spike in schools signing up to take advantage of the Pixelot camera system to stream their events. We thought with this increased interest in transmitting streams by schools, we thought it beneficial to review our streaming policies and procedures. So I should start by identifying a distinction between regular season events and WIAA tournament series events. Schools retain clearance and authorization and decisions to set right fees to transmit video and audio for all their regular season events. But once the membership tournaments begin, the WI determines the clearance and the rights fees for all those transmissions. And in the case of video, we work in partnership with the NFHS network, which owns the rights to the pre-state tournament streaming rights. Schools and outside entities such as parent groups or media interested in transmitting video of tournament events are required to complete the pre-state tournament video transmission application submittable form found on the WIA website. Athletic directors have access to this form by logging in to the website and navigating to the AD resources application, AD resources page on the school's link in the mega menu. So once on that page, you scroll down to the miscellaneous information container on there, and you'll see the pre-state school video stream application on that. Just click on that, fill out the top portion of that, and fill out the information that says, or right under the title for school produced streams only. Upon submitting that request for clearance, it is sent to our office and to Tim Connect with Rush Media. He is the person who has contacted Holst in the past with clearance on behalf of our office and the NFHS network. So you'll receive a call from Tim to set that up. If you are a member of the NFHS network school broadcast network, streaming events during the tournament series is free. If you are using any other platform other than the NFHS network broadcast program, including Facebook Live, YouTube Live, or Twitch, for example, cost for those schools to stream is $150 if the streams do not include any ads or sponsorships. Now, if they do include those sponsorships and advertising, the cost to the school is $200. The rights fees are payable to our video production partner, Rush Media, who, as I mentioned, works with us on behalf of the NFHS network. In addition, please note on the financial forms, the school streaming of the event that is submitted to our office. And in addition, good to let you know that schools will receive 25% of the rights fees back as part of the revenue sharing policy. The same form is used by media, outside media requesting transmissions clearance. You can see, looking at the form, when you look at it, that the fees in place for those outside of the school requesting clearance to stream and broadcast. And for streams, typically the media would have to pay the $250 to Rush Media and WI and the NFHS network. Another area to consider in transmitting high school events is the nature of advertising and sponsorships. We strongly encourage to permit only messages that are appropriate for high school sports and young audiences during regular season event streams. During the tournament series, our membership policies prohibit inappropriate messaging during the event transmissions. One other consideration, I've got a number of emails and it's going around the Midwest states communications directors is consideration of media at your regular season events or postseason events. And we'll just explain to you that during the pandemic, all media-related personnel should follow the same best practice guidelines to social distance and adhere to other mitigating recommendations such as wearing masks if they can't social distance at your games. So that's my report.
Thank you, Todd. And I would only add for members' awareness that internally staff, are having ongoing discussions and conversations in a day and age of likely limited and restricted attendance. What options might be available for getting the chance to view the imagery of the streaming of all of our members' events, our own culminating events that might be able to be imagined, not only along with providing them and getting them out there to meet the interest, but also, frankly, from the business aspect of things, how they might be monetized and generate hopefully some revenue, at least enough to cover costs. From the business sense, the operation of the organization, we need to be mindful of that, generate revenue where we can, where we might, and how we might. And certainly technology, as is evidenced by our expanded use of Zoom meetings, there may be doors opening up for that. So we're having conversations both internally across the Midwest and with other state associations and our partners at the network, the Federation Network, on seeing what changes might be able to be built, developed, and adopted to meet the interest, as well as the need for organizations like ours to generate revenue. Thanks again, Todd. Eric, how about the technology end of things?
Okay, just wanted to touch on a couple of things quick this morning. The first is in regarding to what I'm anticipating everybody is aware of, but perhaps not. We have entered into a partnership with our school over the course of the winter and spring. The intention of this partnership is to provide officials licensing information to our school, and in return we will be pulling in school schedules for the purpose of collecting regular season and tournament results. Specifically, regular season is going to be more and more necessary as we've begun to engage into requests to do computer seeding. In order to seed teams, of course, we have to have results. So we've begun that partnership. We are, as of August 1st, they do have up-to-date licensing of all of our officials. So the officials, as they're licensed in our office, those are being transmitted over to our school via an API real time. So they are getting those officials in their system for you to be able to assign. The data that's in our school on any official that we send over is not editable by anybody except this office. So if there's modification to their licensing, it has to be done on this end or by the official inside of their contact information to get transmitted back to our school. So we have been moving forward on that arrangement. If you notice anything out of ordinary or have some concern or question, please contact the office and let us know. But to my knowledge, that's been going, with the exception of a few hiccups, relatively smoothly at this point. We are going to be moving forward with that partnership, pulling schedules with the intention of pulling those schedules in for the winter season. I'm optimistic that we'll be able to get that done in time to be able to provide schedules for basketball so that we are able to start pulling in and soliciting regular season scores. So if we're moving forward on engagement with seeding, we'll be prepared to be able to do that and take on that venture. In addition, rosters and other information is being made available to us to pull in. So when it gets into items such as ranking, we'll be pulling those schedules into the official center for you to be able to rank. I think that will help simplify items as well for officials so they're not having to redundantly enter those schedules into their system. In addition, I wanted to just touch on an item that I was asked to enhance for COVID over the course of the last month or so. Again, I know some emails and communication went out regarding this tool, but we have expanded our games wanted form that's on the school database. So if you haven't had a chance to go and take a look, if you're looking for contests, you're trying to fill a contest, we have allowed ADs to be able to add games wanted. You're able to tag with a sport, quite honestly, there's several different items that you're able to add on that contest to make searching and locating those easier to find. Coaches are also able to view, but it does require a login for people to be able to get in and utilize that form. If you have any additions that you'd like to see on that form, if there's any requests for enhancements, I'm certainly interested in hearing what they may be. But it looks like at this point we're pulling in hundreds of contests on that form right now. So they do come down by default after 30 days once they're posted. So if you want to leave it up longer, you'll need to either repost or elect the duration for a longer period than 30 days. So that's what I have.
Thank you, Eric. And just to underscore the relationship with our school, I know was something that we have talked about in previous years' area meetings. It has been of interest to WIAA and to athletic directors in general to try to forge and craft a relationship there to allow ADs to utilize the technology that our school provides, along with it as a viable resource for accessing WIAA data. And through the WIAA communications group, along with the WIAA's staff involvement with them and Ray at our school, we are delighted for the agreement that was able to be reached and cemented here not too long ago, and for the work that Eric has done to have that technology interface with WIAA. So thank you, Eric, for that. Megan, how about what's going on in social media?
First, I'd like to reiterate what Stephanie mentioned earlier about seeing so many great examples of schools working hard to get athletes back in the game as safely as possible. Based on the little snippets I've seen on social media, you guys are doing a wonderful job. So thank you for that, and thank you for sharing that on social media as well. On that note, we've continued the Team Up to Beat COVID campaign that was launched in July, in efforts of raising awareness to help slow this and stop the spread of COVID-19 in our communities in hopes of getting students back in the classroom and able to participate in athletics. We'd like to kind of shift and tweak that focus a little bit to keep it relevant now that fall sports and competitions are underway for those schools who were able to make it go this fall, but also keeping in mind that we need to keep practicing social distancing, good hygiene, hand washing, and sanitization practices in order for our winter sports, our remaining fall sports that'll be going in the spring, and then the traditional spring sports to have an opportunity to play in the coming months. So we'll be working on putting forth sort of a part 2 of the Team Up to Beat COVID campaign. And as normal, on social media, we'll be continuing Motivational Monday posts, Friday Facts, which help promote the benefit of high school athletics in the education-based athletic world. This month also began highlighting some more lighthearted trivial content to post each Tuesday. Sharing some mascot origin stories have been going over pretty well with some of our state's more unique and creative mascots. Started with the Rhinelander Hodags last week and featured the Washburn Castle Guards already this morning. So I've reached out to a few of you already who just off the top of my head had some really great fun mascot stories. But please, by all means, feel free to share your school story if you've got a unique story or a unique mascot, something interesting to share. We'd love to feature you. Additionally, as always, we'd love to share any positive stories of sportsmanship or heartwarming feel-good stories from your schools or your conferences. We know there's a lot of great things happening within high school athletics in our state all the time, but those stories don't always make it across our desks and into our office. So please, by all means, share those types of content with us. We love featuring our schools. We love sharing those stories. So please send it to anyone in our office, and they can get it over to me, and we'd be happy to share.
Thanks, Megan. And each of us are so anxious to see glimpses of what is near normal. That right now, seeing a team play, seeing a team run, get out on a course, seeing kids practicing together, getting together with their coaches, each of those are little micro wins for all of us and for this membership. Was just at a Section 4 National Federation section meeting with the executive directors of Indiana and Iowa and Illinois and Michigan. And we bolster each other with the little stories and successes that each member school experiences, and that each state organization experiences. So please, share, celebrate. If you find an idea that's working, if you have a question that we might be able to help with, you get it to us. But utilize those stories to help buoy one another and encourage one another, and sharing the good ideas that work. Let's keep it moving. Steph, there were some adjustments made after our very first year of the Conference Realignment Task Force and the initial launch of that process. Do you want to give us a rundown on what's new?
I will do that. Thanks, Dave. We're not going to revisit all the changes we went through over the past 2 years because we did that last year at our area meetings. So the intent of this presentation is simply to provide you with the updates that have been made since last year. On the next slide, we'll welcome our new task force committee members. We've got Lance Bagstad, superintendent from Arcadia, Barry Rose, superintendent Cumberland, Steve Connect, principal Kenosha Trumper, Chris Vanderheiden, superintendent Menasha, John Gendron, district administrator at Westosha Central, and Ron Rasmussen, the principal at Wisconsin Rapids Lincoln. Thank you to those 6 for the volunteering of their time in advance in this process. This page just shows you some updates that have made to the application since last year. The cycle begins on July 1st. This next line is a new deadline. You must begin your application by October 15th. And this next line, the due date, is also a new deadline. November 15th is when the application is due, which allows for a little time for the task force to review that before their December meetings. Again, as a reminder, 2020, because it's an even year, we are accepting football-only applications this year. And then next year, the odd year will be the non-football applications. And then at the bottom, we have expanded the fast track approval process, which I'll explain on the next slide. If you could open that flow chart, please. Just as a reminder, a fast track application is one where you've got 100% of schools that are in agreement with their with the application, the realignment application. Wait, I think you have to allow that to show. Let me just talk a little bit about the fast track while we're getting that up, that flow chart. Remember, a fast track is 100% of schools involved and affected are in agreement.
Yeah, but it's pretty tiny.
It is.
Somebody needs to mute them.
Unmute, Stephanie.
Yep, someone just muted everyone. So on the left-hand side of the screen, you'll see the fast track process, which is outlined. So because you are in a realignment year for football right now, you would no longer be able to submit a 100% application to the board once we hit the October. However, if you are applying for non-football realignment and you've got 100% agreement, you can send those to us at any time this year. So again, a fast track means everybody involved is on board in an agreement with the realignment. If you could go back to our PowerPoint, that'd be great. We've put some things in place to assist schools in completing the application. You know, the task force spent a lot of time at their last meeting in February last year talking about some ways to improve this. And one of the things we really thought would be helpful is to put some more things in place to help schools with it. So when you go ahead and get that open, Wade, we'll talk about that checklist. On the realignment page, you as an athletic director have access to more things than the general public does on the realignment page. And one of those things is this checklist for schools. The top half of this gives you some items that you'll need to gather before you start completing your application. So this bullet point goes through things that you will need. The bottom half of this sheet is something that the task force added this year. It's a suggested planning timeline for you. So again, there's a lot of work to do. If you look on there, they've got recommendations for starting 1 year prior to you submitting your application and carrying on into the same year. So it's a really nice timeline to follow. Go ahead and keep scrolling down on that final page. This is the detailed timeline for a fast track application. If the flow chart doesn't make sense to you with regard to fast track, look at this. This will tell you exactly what months of the year you can send us an application that has 100% support of all schools. Let's go back to our PowerPoint. Some other items that we put in place to help you with your application is our staff here, primarily myself and Wade and Dave are the ones that you will need to reach out to with regard to conference realignment. And we can help you in any capacity that you need with the application or questions you might have before even starting the application. The new athletic director workshop, we provide some guidance. We will also be having a breakout session at the WIAA workshop this November for those of you who are interested in attending that. The WIAA summer meeting also will have some information. And then finally, if you really would like some help with that application, because it's quite comprehensive, we can assign you a mentor from the task force, a past task force member, to help you each step of the way. Moving on to slide 5. Communication with schools was probably the #1 complaint that our staff heard about the previous process used for conference realignment. I should say the lack of communication was the #1 complaint. So the task force has put very specific steps into place to address that previous concern. Let's go ahead and advance. We'll take each one of these individually. This is directly from the application itself. In section 3, schools are required to provide written documentation of conference meetings in which they have discussed with the other schools their application. And secondly, they are also required to include any type of conference voting or position statements from the schools that they've discussed it with. On the next slide, once a school's realignment application is published, it's completed, every school that is involved gets an automatic notification. This was a recent fast track that was submitted by the new Sun Prairie West for non-football sports. And as you can see, each one of these schools in the Big 8 received an auto notification that Sun Prairie had submitted an application on behalf of entering the Big 8, starting with the fall of, I believe, 2022. The green indicates whether they have already responded. The black indicates whether they have not. But again, going back to the application, it is a requirement that all schools provide a response within the application. Moving on to the next slide, it will show you what the feedback form looks like. So this is one that Jeremy responded to on behalf of Madison Memorial. You basically they ask you yes or no. Are you in favor of this realignment? And then you have an option to add your own comments. You also have an option to attach a document, a formal document from your school if you so choose. The next slide. This shows you the public access to the realignment page. You know, anybody, anywhere can click on either one of these links. These are not live on the presentation today, but if you go to the conference realignment page under schools, they are live, and you can click on those and you can use the drop-down box to look at any year and any active realignment requests that are out there for football or non-football. Let's move on. And then again, this is public on the realignment page. This shows you the current status of existing realignment. Now this is a little outdated because this now has been approved by the Board of Control as of last Friday, but on the website last week, it was shown as a recommendation to the Board of Control. If you go to the website today, you'll see it under Board of Control approvals. At this time, Todd, if there are any questions in the chat on realignment, I'd be happy to take those.
Okay, Stephanie, thank you. Just as a quick reminder that this task force was born out of broad displeasure, frustration felt from and conveyed by our membership, where conference realignment was becoming a destructive force and counterproductive to our ability to move forward as a cohesive and collegial membership. And so with the approval of the Board of Control, a task force was developed and a process built and put in place that with only 1 year of experience in its operation under our belt, the initial, the overall response and reaction to it was great job, great work. And we believe that as we go forward and the process becomes more familiar, it will be a great tool for this membership and for years to come, quite honestly. So Stephanie and Wade, thanks for your work and the leadership. And for those of you who may be on this meeting who are a part of that task force, thank you for the investment that you have made to make this a viable tool for this organization to use. Moving on. Since April, the WIAA's staff and the Board of Control, along with our Medical Advisory Committee, have been working nonstop to try to find a way to provide opportunities for kids. It wasn't long after everything shut down that we began seeing research and emerging studies showing the very negative effects and impact of the closures on young people. And staff and board and medical advisory have been working nonstop to look for those things which are barriers that might be able to be adjusted, that might be able to be relaxed in some way, shape, or form. And internally, we have identified them as COVID accommodations. They are 1 year short-term adjustments because they affect a wide range of WIAA rules and regulations and provisions. They are not intended to be long-lasting. But if and where they are able to provide a measure of relief in unusual circumstances, that has been the intention behind them. And I want to thank the Board of Control for their responsiveness and receptiveness to everything that has come before them, for their engagement and the depth of their study and engagement in all of these accommodations. So I apologize, Wade, you can put them back up. And Steph, we're gonna, now that you've caught your breath, why don't you start them off with the alternative season, the calendar, and so on.
Sure. Much has been said about this already. I just want to reiterate that our staff looked at approximately 8 different scheduling models for this school year. Again, the theme being everything's looking different. Truly, none were good options. All had pros and cons, but ultimately the Board of Control did vote on the schedule that you currently have, which modified all 3 seasons: the traditional fall with a delay, the traditional winter with a bit of a compression, and the traditional spring with the same. And that was done in an effort to make room for an alternate fall season. So our staff continues to work together to look at further COVID accommodations to help alleviate any problems that the new schedule has created. And we continue to have those conversations almost daily. Many of those are going to be highlighted here on the next couple of slides.
WIAA was the very first state in the nation to come up with that alternative fall schedule. And it was really somewhat of a no-brainer when we saw some areas within our membership needing to shut down and button down and make decisions that would have simply denied opportunities for their student athletes if we just forged ahead with a traditional season schedule. Certainly, we recognize the negative impact of last year on the spring sport athletes was, front and center in our thinking. But also the fact that across our membership at the time that these things were being discussed, there were numbers of counties in our membership that, had, fewer than a couple of dozen of COVID cases at that time. And so coming up with as many alternatives to find a way to provide opportunity to young people, to your students, if you wanted to be open, if you wanted to have opportunities, that's what the staff rolled up their sleeves and undertook. And I think I'm grateful to them for all of their work and for the board's support of that. Let's move on to awards, and just very, very quickly and briefly, so that you are aware in advance. If we have culminating events where awards are typically and traditionally a part of that, post-event recognition and so on, that will be different and will look different this year. First and foremost, there will not be draping of medals. If there are awards, they will be left in their plastic wraps. If there are trophies or plaques, they will be provided from a table. They will not be handed off by WIAA staff or Board of Control or coaches organizations just for the contact reasons. In addition, depending on how far different events may go, the awards may need to be sent to you and sent to your school and for you to distribute to your coaches and athletes and others. Simply because, again, for the conserving of resources, we have notified our jeweler that we will not order awards too far in advance and be stuck unable to use them as we were with last winter's championship awards and so on. And so awards may end up being mailed to you. They may not be available on site at the culminating event, but if they are, the recognition and award ceremonies following those events will absolutely be different than what they have been. That'll be up to sport executives to determine exactly how best they might recognize the day's leaders and winners. So moving on, officials classifications. Joan.
Yep, for officials, we've done a number of things regarding their classification and their relicensing. For track, baseball, and softball officials, we are not charging them a sport fee this year. And from last season, we actually refunded a number of officials because they didn't get that season, and we refunded them upon their request. We are not charging any late fees for officials that are choosing to wait right up until the last minute to renew their license for this year. If officials choose not to license for the current school year, their classification level will not drop next year. So they'll maintain their classification level. If L5 and master level officials are required to submit a varsity schedule typically for their classification level, we are waiving all varsity schedules for L5 and master level officials for the current school year. I would just like to say that officials have been very appreciative and thankful for these accommodations that we have provided to them. Thank you.
Thanks, Joan. Wade, scheduling relief.
Yeah, we did touch upon it a little bit earlier when I talked about the football being able to reschedule games. We've allowed conferences and schools to go ahead and assist each other when there's been openings on your schedules and that. So rather than going through the entire conference realignment process, just for this year, schools have been able to, so they can go ahead and provide opportunities for their kids. Also keep in mind that the board on Friday did allow schools to schedule games at all levels, including varsity once eliminated from WIAA tournament, to go ahead and schedule non-varsity ninth grade games, varsity reserve and varsity games through the playoffs. So if you go ahead and you lose in the first round of a regional, you can continue to schedule games at all levels to go ahead and get opportunities for your kids.
Kate, regional groupings, other adjustments.
Yeah, we, each sport executive, as you've already heard, has modified their tournament groupings into a regional area as the tournament begins. Possibly the smallest regional groupings will be for football with 4 teams per group, and the largest may be cross country with 12 teams per group, which is a reduction from 25 team sectionals in traditional years. And in addition to that, I'm just going to go right on to the next segment here, which is that you were asked to declare for fall or alternate fall seasons by September 1st. And we just want you to know, first of all, we know you've got a lot of things going on. We appreciate your responses. So many questions are coming out of our office to you and vice versa. And we just are grateful for your willingness to provide us with timely feedback. Typically, for the state tournament series in each sport, approximately 30 to 40 days from the start of the tournament series. And our hope in doing that is to provide you with the potential tournament plan and then ask you about your participation intentions. We're requesting that you declare your level of participation that would be allowed during that time. I know you've already received volleyball, boys soccer, and cross country in that regard. And I know that there's other sports that have qualifying information that you have to submit as well. And we'll use the information that you send us to determine how to proceed with our tournament plan.
Thanks, Kate. Wade, what constitutes a season? 50% rules.
Again, we discussed this a little bit earlier as well as I related it to football. But the 50% of the season is numbered weeks of practice and number of contests. And we did round up. So if a season was 9 weeks long, you divide it in half, it's 4.5 weeks. We rounded up so that if you get 5 weeks of practice in, or if you get half of the games in, so half of 7 is 3.5. If you get 4 games in, then you would have constituted a 50% of your season. As we talked about, if you have to stop your season due to COVID and the health department shuts you down for quarantine, then you would have the 2 weeks. If it's a 14-day quarantine, you would go ahead and have a pause in there. So if you got 3 weeks in and 2 weeks of the quarantine, you actually have 3 weeks out of those 5, and you would continue with the week after quarantine as being 4. Keep in mind as well that if you stop for a COVID quarantine and it's 14 days or more, you must have 5 separate days of practice before you can have your first competition. If you have a stop between 7 and 14, you must have 3 days of separate practice before you can have your first competition. So keep that in mind. If you have a quarantine and it's 14 days, you're going to have to practice for 5 more days before you can go return to competition.
Our list of COVID accommodations is quite extensive. We have sought to reduce and remove as many barriers and obstacles as might reasonably and feasibly be provided. And we continue to look for those things that we might be able to remove. However, not every rule has been able to be tossed out or set aside or modified. And certainly the acclimatization of student athletes either before a season or after an extended pause in their conditioning are among those, code of conduct and a lot of others. But the list is extensive, and it I think represents a genuine effort to do what is able to be done to facilitate opportunities when and where they might be able to exist. We've also touched a little bit earlier on the non-school competition. And when I mentioned that the 2 games that had previously been our model have been extended to now 2 events. And that still requires school permission to move forward. and as has already been acknowledged, the board did take up the conversation about allowing those non-school events to take place even during WIAA tournament series. It has not been decided or finalized yet, but it will be revisited at the October meeting. So there has been some change and relaxation of the non-school competition rules, not yet addressing what we have heard from some of our members with regard to the tournament season, but it will be addressed and it will be communicated out to members. Seating. Steph.
Just want to mention that for those sports that do have seating in place this fall, it will be done virtually. There'll be no in-person seating done. Our sport director staff will be reaching out to you to see if you'd be willing to host a virtual meeting. And if you do need to use the WIAA Zoom account, please let us know. We can certainly set you up for that. Thanks in advance to those of you who are willing to facilitate those meetings for us.
You know, many of these, thank you, Steph, many of these accommodations, I chuckle as I look at them. I think, golly, we talked about that about 3 months ago, and how far back some of these conversations began. When it came to out-of-state travel and multi-school large events, keep in mind that a lot of this was formulated by information, knowledge, research that was available at the time. Instead of saying, instead of like some states that instituted travel bans and multi-school event bans, staff and board of the WIA took a little bit different approach. And we know that all of you are conscientious and mindful of what your exposures are. And so we have discouraged out-of-state travel. And certainly beyond neighboring and bordering states. We know that we have some members who play schools in the UP, some that play across the river in Minnesota or Iowa or Illinois. But when we are traveling to Oklahoma or Florida and other popular, southern spots, make certain that you have that consent of your school's administration. And if you are conducting multi-school events, make certain that you are able to have your finger on the pulse of the contact tracing and those sorts of things which are important. Make sure if you are bringing other numbers of schools into your school, that you have clear communication on what your expectations are with regard to social distancing and mask wearing and so on. We're all in it together. And the more we help one another, the better chance that we have of being able to sustain these opportunities. Some other accommodations include contact days, coaching contact days, dead period, and outside of the season. Wade.
Okay. Remember, the coaching contact days have been extended. They've replaced the 5 that you did not use during the summer, so those are gone. So any unused summer contact days are eliminated, and now football and fall sports have 15 coaching contact days that they may use. For the alternative fall schools, the 5 coaching contact days for winter sports. There will be 15 coaching contact days for the spring sports, and 0 additional contact days for fall sports that have begun or in the form of practice and competitions. The dead week is still in effect, so you cannot have any of these unrestricted school coaching contact days during the week before the season starts. The one exception is baseball. Baseball coaches will be able to bring in their pitchers and catchers the first week, the week before the season begins. That is the same as it always has been the last bunch of years. However, no one else on your team can come in for a team unrestricted school coaching contact day. Those must be used before that week before. The coaching contact must be self-contained. And what the board meant by that is it's available and accessible only to your students, and it's in any and all interested students. You may not go outside of your school and have a scrimmage with another school. You may not go outside of your competitions with other schools or their students. So keep that in mind. It's only to your students in grades 9 through 12. The school resources may be used. Outside clinicians may be used. In football, you may only use football helmets and no other protection or protective equipment. And keep in mind, your open gyms are still available, but there's no coaching instruction at your open gym. So if the basketball coach wants to use their 5 unrestricted coaching contact days, they can do so and instruct. But once those are used up, they can do open gyms underneath the same open gym guidelines. And I wanted to point out that Tim's McGuine's study is on the COVID-19 page. If you go to the health page and click on COVID-19, directors had asked for that. And I just want to make you aware that that PowerPoint is out there in that form. Tom's up next.
Unmute yourself, Dave.
Right, Tom's up next.
Go ahead.
Okay, thanks, Dave. On the other COVID accommodation for fifth quarter and extra inning waivers, we do have a couple of team sports where there are some additional options after games have been completed. So this fall in football, after completion of a game and or overtime, in football, a 15-minute scrimmage or extra period is allowed. In volleyball, keep in mind that we've always had this, or at least in recent years, an extra set is allowed, and there is no waiver required for that extra set to be played in girls or boys volleyball. As we get to the winter sports season, basketball is planning to continue the same procedures that they have used before, where players could play in both JV and varsity games. A student may not participate in more than the number of halves listed in the season regulations, and that is 22 games if you're playing 66 halves, 23 games if you're playing 69 halves, or 24 games if you're playing in 72 halves. Also remember that a JV game consists of only one half followed by a varsity game with 2 halves. A player would be allowed to play in only 2 halves. That's for basketball. And then in the spring for softball and baseball, we do have the 3-inning waiver, the 3 innings that is allowed without a waiver on the same day or night. So without a waiver, there is a 3-inning option for both softball and for baseball. Those are our extra inning waiver options.
Thanks, Tom. The root and origin of these come from the simple question from members. You know, Dave, do we really need to get another bus and travel, you know, another group of kids and those sorts of things in the day and age of COVID and contact tracing concerns? And so if you have gotten everything in place to have a contest, and if there is interest and an opportunity to extend that contest beyond its normal time and game format, in order to provide opportunities to JV kids or others who have not played, look for opportunities to get those youngsters some playing time. Kate, is there anything that you would like to add regarding continuing games after elimination from the tournament? I know Wade mentioned it a little bit.
Yeah, so let me just tell you what I have, maybe expand on what he said. So the traditional rule reads that you're able to reschedule games that were postponed, but you're not allowed to schedule new games to be played during the tournament series. But the Board of Control has lifted this stipulation for this year only. So once you've been eliminated from the state tournament series, or if you've opted out of this series, you may find other opponents, schedule games, and play those games up until the last day of the tournament series. This also includes non-varsity teams. So typically, all freshman teams have to end their season earlier. That is not the case this year. Even the non-varsity teams who typically end earlier will be allowed to compete in games all the way up until the tournament series ends.
Thank you, Kate. COVID co-ops. We have the interesting experience this year of having members who have been a part of a co-op team. And one of the schools is either in a county or at the local level. Their Board of Ed has determined it's best for them to not begin school until later on, or not to offer sports in the traditional seasons, leaving the other member or members of the co-op depleted and diminished. And so when we began becoming aware of some of these unique and unusual developments, we have been able to provide an
WIAA meeting. They take attendance for this thing.
We have been able to tell members that, look, if one of the schools in your co-op is not able to go, if you're able to find someone else who is able to co-op with you for this year only, 1 year only, create the opportunities. Submit a co-op application form, get the consent signatures of those involved, and find somebody else who is able and willing to partner up with you. And if we can bring some quick and short-term 1 year only relief to provide opportunities for your kids to play by relaxing the co-op rules, bring it to us, and you will be approved. How about academic eligibility, Wade?
Yes, I remember that the board did go ahead and provide the opportunity for schools to provide relief for the fall sports if you have students who had failing grades in the spring semester due to the going down to virtual grading and so forth and so on. So that is available. I wanted to remind you the code of conduct has not changed. We've received multiple requests for that, but because that's a choice and a behavior that the students have gone ahead and done, the code of conduct, the expectation is that you will apply your code as it is written, and there are no changes to that. In addition to that, on Friday's board meeting, the Board of Control did make a rule change to extend the early graduate or the regular graduation to the alternative fall sports. Keep in mind, in our handbook underneath the rules of eligibility, there is an exemption for spring sports. So if you have started baseball or track and field or softball, golf or tennis or soccer, and your graduation is in May, you may continue your spring sport by rule and through the state tournament. Because of alternate fall sports have moved to the spring, those that are in the spring sport or in the alternate fall and have a graduation in May or June may continue to compete in the alternate fall as well, just like the spring. So you can continue through the state championships in that. There was another change that the board did, alternate fall sports only. If a student early graduates, they must maintain a full-time status in order to compete in the spring semester. So if you have a student who graduates, say, January 17th, and they graduate early, they're done at the last bell on the last day of the first semester, unless they stay enrolled as a full-time student. And it happens a lot in swimming and in wrestling. And that would mean they would not have their spring season either. The exception here that the board has put into place is that if a student is a fall athlete and you have moved your alternate fall season to the spring, and that student graduates in January, February, or even December, they may compete in their fall sport and they may practice in their fall sport. That does not apply to their winter sport or to their spring sport, but only in their fall sport. So just want to keep you in mind or make you aware of that. The last thing on the presentation was sports medical guidelines. We've talked about the summer already, which was a great project for our sports medical and our staff to put together. It was not an easy task. It did take some time to put that together. So thanks to the staff for doing their sport-specific guidelines and to our sport medical for doing the general guidelines. The fall was presented to the board and it was approved, and many of you are using those as well. And as I said, I'm communicating back and forth with our doctors today, and we're hoping that we will get the winter out soon and move into the spring. So thank you very much for following those guidelines. And as Dave has said, that the governor did extend the face mask rule, so we'll have to deal with that as well. But that's it for the updates that I have there, Dave, on that. So if we want to go on to the next item.
Yep, Steph, Wade hit the graduating students' ability to continue eligibility into the alternative fall season. So why don't you jump in on the most recently defeated opportunities that the board approved last week?
We'll do Board of Control, just approved this last Friday, just so that there's a clear understanding on what this means. If the tournament series is able to begin and move forward, if a team is unable, if a victorious team is unable to advance due to COVID situations, then that tournament series bid would be offered to the team that they just most recently defeated. So again, for example, if in a regional championship matchup happens between Team A and Team B and Team A is unable to advance, Team B would be afforded that opportunity to advance if their school district allows it. We're trying to reduce the number of buys that exist in the tournament series brackets, at the same time to continue to offer opportunities to schools and to student athletes to continue to compete.
Thank you, Steph. This is the time in our area meeting now where typically we would break you up into groups and have you move around the auditorium and begin a conversation and looking for feedback to a number of different topics that are typically in front of the membership, looking for information that staff can utilize and also share with the Board of Control and other parts of our membership to try to get our arms around large or emerging questions that have come to us. This year for the breakout topics, we identified a couple of topics that we thought would be helpful to the board to hear from the members on, and also from our entire membership to be able to hear from each other on. The first topic in question has to do with that request that was mentioned earlier and is in the form of a member-initiated petition amendment to reconfigure and reshape basketball divisional placement. And, it's an honest conversation that has been around since 2000, when private schools were given by legislative threat, basically, a membership option into the WIAA. And so we did convene a competitive equity committee several years ago. They came back with the recommendation that the members should adopt the success factor. That was, many of you who have been around at all know the entire story. I'm not going to recapture it here. But with regard to studying competitive opportunities, we wanted for the board to be able to have some sense of membership sentiment, broad membership sentiment on that topic. So that and the Division 5 basketball, whether or not that was implemented a number of years back, and it was determined by that group and committee that the 5 divisions would have solved the concerns around basketball and opportunity and competition, whereby going to 5 divisions and keeping enrollments never worse than a 2-to-1 ratio at that time was felt to be adequate and satisfactory. Obviously, the conversation and the interest persists, and so we asked WIAA to put this out and across the membership and solicit feedback on those two things. If 5 divisions hasn't solved the concern, should we, as a membership, go back to 4 divisions and reinstate the 8 Division I schools? So a broad conversation. Tom, I think you put that out to WIAA leadership, and what do you have for us?
What we have is, well, we have a lot of responses, and I'm going to send it over to Todd Sabrilski to introduce each of those district representatives to provide us with their feedback.
Thank you, Tom, and thanks, Dave, for asking for WIAA's help on this. We were happy to be able to get a quick survey out to the membership and solicit some responses for that. And so I'll introduce our district reps, who will give a quick brief synopsis based on their district's replies. And so from District 1 up in Turtle Lake, Mary, if you're out there somewhere, if you could chime in, that would be great.
I'm here, Todd. Are you ready for my answers?
Go ahead, yeah.
Okay. First, regarding what is the goal of the committee, some of the respondents in District 1 said simply to determine if there really is competitive inequity. Most, however, believe that inequity exists, that private schools are favored, it must be addressed, and a viable solution is needed. Question number 2 regarding what will be different for this committee, changing from the committee that was established in 2015. Some ideas were to focus on what worked in 2015, use that, replicate it just for basketball at this point, and focusing just on basketball might produce results that other sports could use and follow that lead in the future. Getting to the 5 divisions, what has changed since the implementation of 5 divisions? Overwhelmingly, my respondents answered nothing. Private schools are still dominating in divisions 4 and 5 when they're coming out of division 1 and 2 communities. So moving on to the next question, what should the committee discuss and determine? Some again said figure out whether there is a competitive imbalance issue. Most respondents again said there is an issue. Some ideas to fix it: 1, create a private school division; 2, bump private schools up 1 division. Another idea is to re-examine how enrollment is determined, perhaps using the current year enrollment as opposed to last year's enrollment. And then factors for the committee to discuss: the fact that private schools can cap their enrollments while public schools cannot. Discuss whether there should be another solution for competitive equity before abandoning Division 5, the Division 5 model altogether. And why do Division 1 teams have more teams at the state tournament than other divisions, and yet they play fewer games in the first round?
Thank you, Mary. We'll move to District 2, Brian, over in Northland Pines. I see you there, Brian, so go ahead.
All right, thanks, Todd. A lot of the same sentiments that Mary just shared. District 2 had some limited replies to this survey, but here's my culminating responses to the topics. The first topic, should there be a committee? Overwhelming 67% said no. There should not be a committee to tackle this topic. The question of, has the Division 5 basketball model worked? 83% felt no, it has not worked. And other models should be continued to be looked at. The next topic was, should the WI return to the 4-division, 8-team Division 1 model? And that was split 50-50. In District 2, collectively, several ADs would like the committee to explore equity in all sports, not just basketball, across the entire state. looking at it from the far north to the south. They would ask that you please continue to examine the urban versus rural and the public-private discrepancies. They would like to see that, a continued search for that magic formula or model to create equity for all sports and not just basketball, even though it is basketball driven. That was somewhat demonstrated earlier when Wade talked about the petition with number 3 earlier in his presentation. Some challenges that AD saw post-COVID-19, a lot of extra preparation and need of individuals for running events due to additional guidelines and requirements. ADs are and continue to be frustrated that the WIAA gave local control to fall sports, which they feel has pitted schools in the same areas, counties, and conferences between themselves. A top-down leadership decision felt if it would have been a uniform state decision would have been preferred. Finding officials and members in our districts to run events is a challenge now post-COVID. And then finally, a lack of uniform public knowledge and understanding regarding the consideration and requirements of the guidelines across the state has kept coaches and our goal is to keep spectators, athletes, coaches safe. And we would like, the general public to do a better job of realizing that it's different across each county and each school district. Everybody's striving to either continue or return to face-to-face. And I believe every athletic director is trying to help accomplish that goal. I know the governor's face-to-face order may or may not help with that. So that is a report out of District 2.
Thank you, Brian. We'll move to District 3 then, South Central Wisconsin. I believe our gender rep, Cora Dillon's going to give us a report there. So Cora, go ahead.
With the yes and no questions, there really was no consensus. It was pretty split with that. Goal of the committee, just level the playing field, equity with the private schools. What will be different? Some feel that there's more reliable data that further merits the discussion to be resumed on this topic. What has changed? Just the feeling that more private schools get to state, private and then the affluent suburban schools. What should the committee discuss and determine? The competitive balance, and just really discuss the data, verify the data, and try to develop that formula which produces more equitable outcomes. Factors to consider on these positions. Just again, finding a model that will allow for the competitive equity. The trying times, kind of what's been said, just the county versus the school versus WIAA recommendations, and the fact that guidelines are continually changing, and just the frustrations of all the schedules, the unknown, and the extra time that it's taken to work on all of these things. And that's District 3.
Thank you, Cora. We'll move to District 4, Kathy Bates from Appleton Xavier. Go ahead, Kathy.
Thank you. Okay, I represent the great District 4, and I have to say the responses or the amount of responses was somewhat disappointing, because usually they're very active, and I'm attributing it to the fact that they're all so crazy busy during this COVID time. But with regard to the yes and no questions, it was pretty much no to forming a committee, and the goal, they agree it's probably to address disparity, and especially with basketball, and they mentioned certain types of schools. I think that's a reference to private. Was there any difference? would it make a difference? They were saying no. They think, there was one comment that you can't legislate morality, which I thought was an interesting remark. What has changed with the 5 division? It ranged from the quality of play has diminished at the state tournament all the way to we really appreciate the fact that the more small schools got there. So it was a wide range of answers on that. What should be discussed? Better divisional placement. I don't know necessarily what that means, but the 5 division solution, was it a solution? Did it resolve the problem? Overwhelmingly, no. Factors to consider, that attendance has dropped at state basketball, and maybe the 5 division had an impact on that, not sure. That it's a public-private issue, and larger schools would wish for more representation because they represent more of the students in the state. That was one remark. And another, what I thought interesting remark was, why don't we just stop focusing our energy on equity and instead focus our energy on engaging more students into athletic activities. What our membership found is most challenging was, my favorite response was all in capital letters, the unknown, and the lack of leadership initially, that a lot of the leadership and guidelines and so on seemed to have come to us so late. We were all kind of sitting on the edge of our seats. Extra time required to manage everything and rescheduling, and with having some conferences split up, you know, doing various things because they're coming from different counties and so on. It created extra challenge. That's our District 4.
Thank you, Kathy. We'll move to District 5. That would be Brittany from New Glarus High School. So Brittany, go ahead.
All right. So District 5 is all over the place. We do have consensus in the 3 yes/no questions. The overwhelming majority answered no to all 3 of those. The goal of the committee would be to address the competitive equity to establish a level playing field. In terms of what would be different, not a ton, but some would just like to see a more continual review. What has changed? Private school representation has increased, some feel, especially in lower level divisions, and overall less interest in the tournament was pointed out. Discussions for the committee, the equitability for all member schools, especially the differences between our rural and urban settings. In terms of factors to consider, there are several. Attendance at the tournament, upward movement of powerhouse teams. Going back does not solve the inequitable private school representation. 3 divisions of 8 teams. A lack of enrollment boundaries for private school teams. The demographics of comparable size schools can be quite different. And separate divisions for public and private was brought up. And then lastly, the most challenging, there's several responses here too. Parents, politics, waiting on others and schedule uncertainties, the possibility of further cancellations like our winter sports, the participation disparities between schools for fall versus spring, contact tracing, student athletes not following their COVID protocols, and a lack of statewide approach and consistency to slow the spread and limit our contacts. And that's District 5.
Thank you, Brittany. We'll move to District 6 then. Eric, down in Burlington. Go ahead, Eric.
All right. The goal of the committee, I think we didn't have many responses, but bottom line is they're looking for private public school competitive equity, finding that balance. What will be different compared to 2015? Issue continues to be a problem is what is felt. I think we can increase our amount of data and understanding of what everything could look like potentially. What has changed since the WIAA basketball tournament went to 5 divisions? More opportunities for kids. We did get a response that actually makes it harder on smaller schools. But at the same time, some of our smaller schools don't have the ability to pull from metropolitan areas, and that was voiced in that one. Also with the next question, what should the committee discuss to be determined about just how private schools don't necessarily, somebody stated that they don't have to educate everybody necessarily and can deny admission. So that was some of the thoughts on that. Factors to consider on these positions: equalize the number of schools and divisions, school by school equity. That the kids in Division 5 should be just as important as the teams and kids in Division 1, and so making sure that that's kind of, the equity piece is there. In regards to COVID, obviously the constant rescheduling that people have shared already, that's across the board with a lot of the responses there. Obviously not knowing about what winter sports looks like, I think people want to get going on that. Somebody even stated, I can't believe no one has even said anything about wrestling yet during these COVID times and what that may or may not look like. So, and obviously dealing with communities that are split on what's the right thing to do and that political divide that is in most of our communities, or a lot of them anyways. That's what we have from District 6.
Thank you, Eric. And last but certainly not least, from Southeastern Wisconsin and Tosa East High School, Michelle.
Hello, good afternoon now, officially, kind of, almost. For the yes and no questions at District 7, everyone that had responded had stated no to those questions that were asked. What's the goal of the committee? Most people were talking in regards to competitive equity on success, not necessarily on location. A few of you that it's not a problem at all. What is the difference, or what would be different from the committee from 2015? Some people thought that using free and reduced lunch as a consideration would be impactful. A success factor would be more impactful. And then, as someone else indicated earlier, just having more data to look at and get a bigger sample of membership schools would be more helpful. What has changed in the tournament since they went to 5 divisions? A couple of people stated that there's obviously there's more larger schools, being that they're in more D1 and D2 divisions, so there's actually more of the bigger schools there. The loss of the quarterfinal games for all the divisions, which then alludes to attendance drop, because now you're really only going there for 2 of the games. You're not getting to be able to go out there and see a huge number of games on that quarterfinal day. So that, that switching from the 5 created that, and that they felt that there was some more equity for some of the smaller schools. If there is a committee, again, what should this committee discuss and determine? Looking back at going to 8 teams at Division 1, if not even just for that division, not at the other divisions. Looking at the success factor again, but not by location, just using it based off of the overall success factor. That moving up more Division 1s to the old format, again, going back to the Thursday, having more of a draw, more of people there, and then making it so that not all the divisions are equal number. Factors to consider on that is, again, going back to not having a statewide representation, changing that philosophy, going back more onto the success factor. Again, don't need equal number in each division. And one particular person stated, unlikely to change circumstances much, be it if it's at 4 or 5. Most state-bound private school programs are in smaller schools. So if you go from 5 to 4, which is what it was before, you're going to still have the same issue at Division 4 that now you're having at Division 4 and 5. And then the last question of how we're enduring. Obviously, being in District 7, we are pretty much a hotbed of the COVID situation. And so one major one that many people had said was, just the local health changing and inconsistency that we have across the board, from be it if it's the city's district rulings from their health departments to the county health departments, but from the WIAA and from everything else, not just, I think this is also just, in general statewide, of lack of a unified approach, the timeliness on decisions, lack of direction, trying to make these last minute adjustments for, major events and activities that we're, putting on. And last two things was just trying to provide, getting more input from the ADs about these decisions, not just from the coaches associations, as those questions are being asked. And someone, as Kathy alluded to, someone responded in her district in capital letters. We had a person that just said politics in all capitals, the lack of unified state approach regarding athletics, and epic failure. And then the last one, just, trying to keep balance, life balance, work, life going, and staying sane. So that's about all from District 7.
Thank you, Michelle. And again, Dave, thank you for allowing us to be able to help you here. And if there's anything else you need before we have these people mute themselves, let me know.
Todd and WIAA leadership, thank you for that help and for reaching out and providing, sharing this information and response. If you would, please email me a summary of your remarks and the feedback that you received. The Board of Control did respond to the Advisory Council request and acknowledged the request, and I think had tabled the conversation and until the May meeting, if my memory serves me, after we come a little bit further, get through some of the more immediate challenges right now. But they have not set the conversation aside indefinitely, and so this. And the majority of the Board of Control are present for all of these conversations, and so they have heard membership feedback firsthand. So if you would assemble those and get all of that information that was shared, Todd, I'd like to have it as part of the record to share with the board when they take up this conversation and request again.
We'll get that summary to you, Dave, in a short little while. Thank you.
And while it's fresh in my mind, I just want to thank you, Todd, and Nathan and Jeremy especially for all of the help, the sidebar conversations, all the 12th hour little emergencies that have been brought to you guys. And your entire leadership team. And we are grateful for the help. We have utilized your wisdom and are grateful to have had it. So thank you for that. Let's get moving on toward wrapping this up. And Steph, do you want to take us through the year in review?
I'd be happy to, Dave. 2019-2020, leading into now the 2020-21 school year certainly has been one of the most challenging in most of our careers. Hopefully it is the most challenging that we ever face. But let's take a moment at least to review and reflect on at least the first 2/3 of the 2019-20 school year and just some of the highlights. There's so many good things to talk about. We're not going to highlight everything on these slides, but let's just look at a couple of these. First of all, on this first slide, Jim already mentioned the Enhance Awards program for our licensed officials, which is so important on providing incentive for the retention and the recruitment of our officials. Cassie has noted that we've got about $2.7 million that was reimbursed to our member schools last school year. We celebrated 3 different 50th state championships last year with gymnastics, girls state swim and dive, and also the boys hockey tournament. On the next slide, if you have a chance to move ahead.
Good.
All right, there we go. We had some sports-specific highlights last year, and so this year will be the year that those have taken effect and seen how those have worked. As Megan mentioned, we had a social media campaign, the Team Up to Beat COVID, so thank you so much for those of you who have been contributing to that. We had an inspirational video done last spring to help our spring sport athletes who've lost so much, and the coaches and the officials. We had hoped that they knew that all of us were thinking about them. That was featured last spring in the heart of our first quarantine. And then as Eric had mentioned, we've created a new partnership with Our School Today, and we're really looking forward to where that heads. Moving on to the final slide, this highlights many of the WIAA staff and our statewide staff who are being recognized or involved professionally on more than just a state level, but also district-wide or nationwide. We had 4 coaches last year that were chosen as Section 4 winners in the nation. Scott Farmer from Antigo in the sport of baseball, Jeff Hodson from Belmont in softball. By the way, both of those 2 are new ADs this year, so I look forward to listening to those 2, how they're going to juggle things. Girls soccer, Robert Rickards from Notre Dame, and gymnastics, Mary Scher from Hartford Union. Pam Fagan continues to serve on the National Federation Board of Directors as an at-large representative representing our state of Wisconsin. We've got many licensed officials noted on these last 2 slides, and WIAA staff serving on the National Federation Rules Committees. And then finally, Dr. Tim McGuine on the final slide, serving on the National Federation Sports Medicine Advisory Committee. And he's been so helpful to not only our state, but to the nation. If you do know of staff serving in the athletic director's role or official's role or something for the year of 2021, if you do know of those, please get those to us so we can include these as recognition on our reflection slides. We've already received a few of those, and we're looking forward to highlighting those a year from now, and hopefully that's being done in person.
Thank you, Stephanie. Wade, is there anything we have heard and seen interest in and around wrestling? What I can share is that it was a big topic at our Section 4 meetings a week ago. So absolutely, the conversations of and about wrestling, how is it going to go, what's it going to look like, are ongoing. The fact that we have not put anything out yet is due largely to the fact that it still is a developing conversation, developing guidance and opinions from the medical community. What I can tell you is that from my perspective, it's one of the very first conversations that I'm having with my colleagues and contemporaries across the country. And the response ranges from doing nothing at all, it's wrestling as usual. There's some who hold a sentiment that of all sports, wrestlers are used to dealing with diseases, but I'm not convinced yet that that's the right answer or solution. Wade, do you have anything that your group has been talking about, just because we have some members who are interested?
We've provided our guidelines to the sports medical, and hopefully they'll get those going. We do have some adjustments that will be needed as far as a skin fold testing and how that would look like in your own schools as you get kids gathered together to go ahead and get skin fold tested. We would ask, that you follow the guidelines for masking up. The weigh-ins would be, separated by 6 feet. And we'd ask that the skin fold measurer does go ahead and use the hand disinfectant in between each of the kids. We've talked about how weigh-ins would look differently. We have gone through the entire country the National Federation. We received some of the responses back, probably about 30 out of the 51. And it appears that everyone is going to have wrestling in their own state associations. And it appears that there will be shorter seasons. Most have moved the start dates back. More generally, not as far back as ours is, on November 23rd, but they have moved theirs back, and they have condensed them at the backside as well. So right now, we are planning on going ahead and seeing if we can get wrestling going. I've told, wrestling coaches, as we've met with them, that, it'd be a good thing to start getting your kids working out with masks on so they can get in shape. Dr. Walter found a study that says that that does not decrease your capacity as far as cardiovascular, and it does not go ahead and increase your CO2, provided you're not working out in an N95 mask or a surgical mask. Those are not supposed to be used when people are exercising. So we've been trying to go ahead and get that in. And as our staff talked with the board about what your culminating event might look, we might not be able to get everybody into the Kohl Center. We might have to use different sites for Division I and Division II and Division III. As Dave said, that they had a very good meeting at Section 4. We might have to do a Division I only tournament in one day and see if we can't get that done at one of our member schools rather than at the Kohl Center. And we may have to go ahead and offer availability by streaming for the spectators rather than trying to get that many different people inside. So we've been talking about what those events would look like, that before you get on the bus to go to an opposing school, that you would temperature check to make sure that everybody meets that requirement, that nobody has had a fever in the last 24 hours. If they have, that you would leave them behind and they would remain at your school. So we're trying to talk about what adjustments we can make wrestling wise, because it is a full contact sport. It's considered a high risk sport for going ahead and infecting others. And we'll see how it was. But, we saw that there was a tournament in Vegas that had 2,400 wrestlers in it. They've had everybody go ahead and temperature check before they entered, and 24 hours before sign a sheet, and there was nothing traced back to it. So it's really, we're trying to see, it's so fluid right now. We're not sure exactly what we're going to be able to do.
As I shared with Wade, the state of Michigan has delayed their wrestling season until after Thanksgiving and after the Christmas holiday to kind of limit the window of exposure that is likely to happen over those two holidays. They're not starting their wrestling until January, modifying the season. So, as decisions are firmed and put in place, they certainly will be shared with all of you and all of your coaches. One other very quick thing, running through our list, one other possible constitutional amendment coming forward to you this year comes from our sportsmanship committee. And Mr. Clark, I apologize for jumping over you, but in essence, the sportsmanship committee has asked the membership to consider a rule relating to ejected fans, whether they be parent, adult, whomever, student fan. If a fan is ejected, the sportsmanship committee has recommended that they also serve the minimum of the 1 game suspension that is currently in place for student athletes who are ejected. And so, Todd, I apologize for skipping over, but consider yourselves informed and advised on that one, please. With that, we have gone a little longer than we projected and forecast. I do want to thank certainly the staff and the board for being here and all the staff contributions to today's effort. But most importantly, I'd like to thank each and every one of you. We recognize these times are more challenging than any that we have faced, either individually or as a membership. There are times when it is easy to become annoyed. There are times that frustration at seeing our efforts and our plans either not recognized or not appreciated or simply, not coming to fruition after countless hours of work and effort put into them. The WIAA and this membership will endure. We are going to come out the other side of this storm sooner or later. And whatever struggles, whatever arguments and disagreements we need to endure, we will do that. And as I encourage our staff all of the time, it's okay to challenge ideas, attack ideas, find the best one. Don't let an insufficient idea or an inaccurate thought be the last sound in the room. Attack ideas, but not one another. We recognize all of you for the you're not sleeping at night. You're working all night in your dreams and your thoughts. You're working to find solutions, and we're proud of that partnership with all of you. And I want you to know, I ask you to know that this staff is working as tirelessly as you are to come up with the solutions that might allow us to go forward and go forward together when we come out of the cloud of this pandemic. So I do wish you all of the very best in bringing your kids back to school and bringing your teams back to your gyms and your courts and your fields. And we are here to help. We are here to serve. So thank you for all of the time you gave us today. Take care and be well. That will conclude our work for today. Thanks, everyone.